My son dropped off his 6-year-old daughter for me to watch for 5 days so he could go on a vacation with his wife's family. On the very first morning, I made her a plate of sunny-side-up eggs, but she pulled her hands back trembling all over. Staring at me blankly, she whispered, "Grandpa, will I be punished if I eat this?" Then, shaking uncontrollably, she dropped straight to her knees on the floor. At that exact moment, I knew the facade of a happy family they had painstakingly put on all this time was officially over. This story starts quietly, but it won't leave you unchanged. Before we continue, drop a quick comment for me. Where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Some details in this story have been fictionalized for reflection and storytelling. What truly matters is the message at its heart. I hadn't touched the rose bushes since Helen died 2 Septembers ago, but something about that Thursday morning made me pick up the clippers. Maybe it was the way the light hit the thorns. Maybe it was 67 years of life teaching me that neglect doesn't make grief easier. Either way, I was elbow deep in overgrowth when the leased SUV pulled into my driveway without warning. My son Bryce stepped out first, 38 years old, wearing a shirt that cost more than my monthly water bill jaw, set tight the way his grandfather used to be, before the old man said something cruel. I hadn't seen that expression on Bryce's face in years. I hadn't wanted to. The passenger door opened and Ivy climbed out. 6 years old, barely 6, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one glass eye missing the fur worn thin around the neck from too much holding. She looked smaller than I remembered from her birthday 3 months ago. Kids usually look bigger every time you see them. Ivy looked smaller. "I need you to watch her," Bryce said, already pulling her small backpack from the rear seat. 5 days, Saskia's family has something in Dallas. I set down the clippers and wiped my hands on my jeans. "Bryce, what's going on? When do you need—" "I'm already late." He handed Ivy the backpack. Didn't kneel down to her level, didn't kiss her goodbye, didn't tell her he loved her, or when he'd be back. Just set the bag at her feet like dropping off dry cleaning and climbed back into the SUV. The engine was already running. "What, Bryce?" The door slammed, tires on gravel, gone. I've been a pediatrician for 31 years, most of them in the emergency room at Dallas Children's Hospital. I've learned to read what parents don't say in the space between their words and the door closing. That departure said plenty. Ivy stood on the porch steps, still holding the rabbit against her chest with both arms. She wasn't crying, wasn't calling after him, just watching the corner where his truck had disappeared, like maybe if she stared hard enough, it would come back. She didn't wave, didn't move at all for a full minute. "Now, hey there, sweetheart," I said, climbing the steps slowly. 31 years taught me not to rush a frightened child. "You hungry?" She shook her head. No words. Her eyes stayed on that corner. "That's okay. Let's get you inside." She followed me through the door, but didn't let go of the rabbit, didn't take off her shoes, didn't ask where she'd be sleeping, or if she could watch TV, or any of the normal things a 6-year-old asks when visiting Grandpa. She just stood in my living room like she was waiting for instructions. I showed her to the guest room, the yellow one Helen used to call the sunshine room because of how the afternoon light came through the west window. Ivy set her backpack on the bed without unpacking, placed the rabbit carefully on the pillow, stood there looking at it. "You can unpack if you want," I told her. "Make yourself comfortable." She nodded but didn't move. By evening I'd made pasta, nothing fancy, the kind with the spiral shapes kids like because they're fun to stab with a fork. I turned on cartoons in the living room, set her bowl on the kitchen table, sat down across from her with my own. Dig in," I said. She picked up her fork, looked at the pasta, then her eyes went to the kitchen doorway. Not to the TV, not to me, to the doorway. She took a small bite, chewed carefully, swallowed. Her eyes never left that doorway, like she was waiting for someone to burst through and catch her doing something wrong. "You don't like the pasta?" I asked. Her gaze flicked to me, then back to the doorway. "It's good," she whispered. "You sure I can make something else?" "It's good," she repeated. Took another small bite, eyes on the doorway. She ate maybe half the bowl before pushing it aside, said she was full, asked if she could be excused, carried her bowl to the sink without being asked, rinsed it, set it in the dish rack with the careful precision of someone who'd been taught there were consequences for not doing it right. When did a 6-year-old learn to eat like she was being watched? After she went to wash up, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at that half-eaten bowl of pasta. The cartoons still played in the other room. The evening light came through the west window the way it always did, golden and warm and ordinary. But nothing about this felt ordinary. I've documented child abuse cases for 3 decades. I know the clinical signs. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network has a whole list: hypervigilance food, hoarding regression in social skills, fear responses to normal activities. But knowing the signs in a textbook is different from seeing them, across your dinner table in your own granddaughter. The way she watched that doorway, the way her hand hesitated before each bite like she was checking if it was allowed, the way she'd gotten smaller instead of bigger, the way Bryce's jaw had been set exactly like his grandfather's. I sat in that kitchen long after Ivy went to bed, the half-eaten pasta still on the table. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that amplifies your thoughts until they're louder than facts, louder than evidence, louder than the voice in your head saying you're retired, you're tired, you're seeing ghosts where there's only grief. But I wasn't seeing ghosts. I was seeing a child who would learn to eat in fear. And I'd spent 31 years learning what fear looked like when it sat at a dinner table. I just never thought I'd see it in my own granddaughter's eyes watching a doorway like it might explode. By morning, I'd need to know if my instincts were right, or if grief was making me paranoid. By morning, I'd need to watch more carefully. By morning, I'd need to decide whether to trust what 3 decades of emergency room pediatrics had taught me to recognize. But tonight I just sat in Helen's kitchen, looking at half-eaten pasta, and felt something cold settle in my chest that had nothing to do with the September air coming through the window. By Friday morning, I'd stopped second-guessing my instincts. 31 years in pediatric emergency rooms don't lie to you at 3 in the morning. I made fried eggs the way Helen used to, 2 over easy butter in the cast iron until it sang. Set the plate in front of Ivy with orange juice and toast. Simple breakfast. Normal. Ivy stared at the plate. Her hand hovered over the fork, pulled back, hovered again. Her whole body trembled. "Grandpa," she whispered, "will I be punished for eating this?" Then she dropped to her knees on the kitchen floor, not sat down. Dropped to her knees like she'd done it 100 times before, like her body knew exactly what position to take, like this was the required posture before meals. I've seen burns and breaks and worse in 3 decades of emergency medicine, but I'd never seen a 6-year-old kneel before breakfast and ask permission to eat food already on her plate. I knelt beside her, kept my voice gentle. "Sweetheart, no, you're never in trouble for eating here. Never." She looked at me with huge eyes, trying to figure out if I was lying or if this was some kind of test. Can I eat it all?" "Yes, all of it, and I'll make you more if you want." I helped her back into the chair. She picked up the fork with both hands like she needed the extra grip. Then she ate. Not like a child eating breakfast, like someone who didn't know when the next meal was coming. I'd spent 31 years watching children eat in hospital cafeterias. I knew what hunger looked like. This wasn't hunger. This was survival. She devoured both eggs, fork barely making it from plate to mouth. Her eyes stayed on the kitchen doorway the entire time, waiting for someone to burst through and catch her. When she finished, I turned back to the stove and made 2 more eggs. Set them in front of her without a word. "I'm making you more," I said. "Don't ask permission. Just eat." "Daddy says extra food makes children soft," she whispered between Bite's eyes, still on that doorway. I kept my hands steady on the skillet. 31 years of keeping them steady. "You're at Grandpa's house now. Different rules." She cleaned the second plate as fast as the first. When she asked to be excused, I watched her carry the plate to the sink with careful precision. Rinse, dish rack, hands folded. The moment she left the kitchen, I walked to my office. Bottom drawer of the old oak desk. I pulled it open and reached past retirement files. The forensic notebook was still there, leather cover worn soft from years of documentation. Almost full. Pages that had sent people to prison. Then I began the first clinical entry: observed behavior, direct quotes, physical evidence. Subject, female age 6. Kneeling posture before meals, requests permission to eat food already served. Exhibits hypervigilance toward doorways. States father restricts food quantity. Quote, "Will I be punished for eating this?" Quote, "Extra food makes children soft." My hands were steady when I wrote it. I picked up the phone and called Hayes. My younger son answered on the 3rd ring from Austin. Hayes Harrington, 35, worked in tech, but kept the schedule of someone who expected emergency calls. He'd been waiting for one since his mother died. "Dad, it's 7 here. What's wrong?" "When you saw Ivy at the Whitfield party in July, how did she look?" "Enda tisen on mwande mukor." Long pause. I could hear him thinking, rewinding. "Small," he said finally. "Quiet. Why?" Did she eat dinner? Another pause. Longer. Bryce didn't let her. Her dress got dirty playing outside. He said she needed to learn that appearances matter at formal events. I thought he was showing off for Saskia's family, Bernard Whitfield the corporate titan thing. I figured Bryce was being extra strict to impress him. Did Ivy look hungry? The silence told me Hayes was finally seeing what he'd been looking at without seeing. Yeah, he said. Yeah, Dad. She looked hungry. I need you to stay available by phone. Don't tell Bryce we talked. What's going on? Just stay available. I hung up and looked down at the notebook page. Added one more line. First witness, younger son, Hayes. Confirms food restriction in public setting, July 2024. Victim observed as withdrawn and small. Punishment for soiled clothing meal denial. How long does it take to teach a 6-year-old to kneel before asking for food? I didn't know, but I knew how to document it. I knew how to build a case that would hold up in court. I knew how to take behavior and turn it into evidence into testimony, into records that put people away. I'd done it to strangers for 31 years. Now I was doing it to my own son. The handwriting was steady. The hands that held the pen were steady. 31 years of emergency medicine had taught me to keep my hands steady even when everything else was falling apart. I closed the notebook, set it in the drawer, walked back to the kitchen where Ivy sat drawing with crayons I'd dug out of Helen's craft box. She looked up when I entered, smiled. A real smile, small and uncertain, but real. Can I draw you a picture, Grandpa? I'd like that. By Saturday, I'd need more than Hayes's memory and a plate of eggs. I'd need physical evidence. Photographs. The kind of documentation that couldn't be explained away as strict parenting or different family values. But right now, I sat down beside my granddaughter and watched her draw stick figures with a purple crayon and thought about how many more eggs I'd make her before Bryce came back to take her home to whatever was waiting there. The physical evidence I needed found me. Ivy fell asleep on the couch at 2 that afternoon, still clutching the one-eyed rabbit. I carried her to the guest room with the yellow walls Helen's sunshine room and set her on the bed. She didn't wake, just curled around that rabbit and kept sleeping. I went to get her a blanket from the closet. That's when I saw the small bag Bryce had packed sitting on the dresser. 2 changes of clothes, barely enough for 5 days. I pulled them out to hang them up so they wouldn't wrinkle open the sock drawer to put the extras away. The Ziploc bag sat tucked under 2 pairs of socks. Not Bryce's packing. Ivy had put this here herself. I lifted it carefully. Crackers, saltines. The bag had been opened and resealed so many times the zipper barely held. The crackers inside were stale. I could tell just from how they sat in the bag, broken and soft from humidity getting in through the worn seal. This wasn't yesterday's hoarding. This was a system. I set the bag back exactly where I'd found it and checked the jacket hanging on the chair, the light blue one she'd worn when Bryce dropped her off. Both pockets had granola bars. The wrappers were crinkled from being carried for days, maybe weeks. One bar was crushed nearly to powder. Children don't carry emergency food in their jacket pockets unless they've learned to. I knelt down and looked under the bed. Pediatric instinct, professional thoroughness. The kind of checking I'd done in emergency rooms when the story didn't match the injury. The apple core sat far back against the wall, wrapped carefully in a napkin. Brown, shriveled, at least 3 or 4 days old. She'd brought it from home, saved it, hidden it the moment she arrived before I'd even made her the first meal. A 6-year-old shouldn't know how to build a food cache. She should know how to ask for seconds. I stood up and looked at the small backpack Bryce had packed. It sat on the floor next to the bed, still zipped. I'd watched Ivy take out her toothbrush last night, but nothing else. Now I opened it fully. 2 changes of clothes. The rabbit had been on top, she'd pulled him out first thing. Toothbrush. 1 book with a torn cover. That was the main compartment. I unzipped the small front pocket. 6 individual crackers wrapped in a napkin, the kind you take from a restaurant. 2 juice box straws, without the juice boxes, just the straws wrapped in tissue paper and saved. A granola bar wrapper, smooth, completely flat, no creases like she'd ironed it with her hands because the wrapper itself was precious. Ivy had packed her own survival kit inside her father's bag. A 6-year-old had created redundant food storage across multiple locations, drawer pockets under the bed backpack, because she'd learned that relying on a single hiding place wasn't safe enough. I sat down on the floor of that yellow-walled room. The afternoon light came through the window, the way it always did, warm and gentle. Helen used to say this room felt like hope. Right now, it felt like evidence. Evidence of systematic food deprivation. Evidence of a child who'd learned to hide food with the sophistication of someone who'd been doing it long enough to develop strategy. Evidence of a 6-year-old who thought she might starve if she didn't plan ahead. The apple core was at least 4 days old. She'd brought it from home, saved it, hidden it, just in case. I didn't touch anything else. Didn't clean it up. Didn't throw away the stale crackers or the ancient apple core or the carefully smoothed wrapper. I stood up, pulled out my phone, and started taking photographs. Sock drawer wide shot showing placement. Close-up of the Ziploc bag with visible wear on the seal. Jacket on the chair. Both pockets open to show the granola bars. Date stamp running on every photo. I got down on my knees and photographed under the bed. The flash lit up that brown apple core wrapped in its napkin like it was evidence at a crime scene. Because it was. Backpack contents, every item, the 6 crackers, the straws, the flattened wrapper. I photographed the book too. Copyright page showed 2020, but the cover was torn like it had been read 100 times. The only entertainment she'd brought, the only thing besides food she'd thought to pack. When I had 37 photographs with timestamps, I went to my office and opened the forensic notebook. New entry, September the 6th, 2:45 p.m. Physical evidence of systematic food hoarding. I drew a diagram of the room, labeled each hiding location, noted the condition of each item, estimated timeline based on degradation. Sock drawer, Ziploc bag, saltine crackers, stale. Bag seal, worn from repeated opening, suggesting long-term use pattern. Jacket pockets. 2 granola bars wrappers indicate days or weeks of carry time. 1 crushed to powder suggests multiple transport cycles. Underbed, apple core. 3 to 4 days degradation, brought from home environment. Hidden immediately upon arrival before first meal offered. Backpack. 6 crackers, 2 straws, no juice, boxes, 1 wrapper, empty preserved. Redundant storage strategy indicates learned behavior from chronic food insecurity. You don't hoard food unless you've learned food might not come. You don't develop a multi-location hiding system unless you've learned that people find your stashes and take them away. You don't bring an apple core from home unless you've learned that what you have might be all you get. The question was how long Ivy had been learning these lessons. I photographed the notebook pages, backed them up to the cloud, sent copies to my encrypted email. The same protocol I'd use for hospital cases when I knew the evidence might disappear if someone got access to the files. Then I put the notebook back in the drawer and returned to the yellow room. Ivy was still asleep, curled around that one-eyed rabbit. The hidden food sat exactly where she'd placed it. The sock drawer, the jacket pockets, the shadows under the bed, the secret compartment of her backpack. I left it all there, preserved in place. By Saturday, I'd need to see what other lessons she'd learned. By Saturday, I'd need to know what else a 6-year-old had taught herself to survive in her own father's house. I found the first survival skill in the sock drawer. Saturday morning, I found the rest. The Texas sun came through the kitchen window warm and clean, and I asked Ivy if she wanted to see the garden. She looked up from her cereal third bowl, still watching the doorway, and nodded. The backyard hadn't been tended since Helen died, but late summer still held a few flowers. Ivy walked slowly across the grass, taking small steps, like she wasn't sure she had permission. Then she crouched near the flower bed. "Grandpa, look." Her voice had actual excitement in it. "It made a ball." A roly-poly bug sat curled in her palm. "That's called a roly-poly," I said. "Or a pill bug. You can hold it, it won't hurt you." She watched it uncurl and crawl across her fingers with pure delight. 6 years old and fascinated by bugs the way kids should be. I'd brought the Canon digital camera, the one I'd used for medical documentation, and started taking photos. Ivy examining the bug. Ivy looking at the flowers. Just a grandfather photographing his granddaughter on a Saturday morning. "Can I take it inside to show?" She stopped. Remembered her father wasn't here. "You can keep it if you want. We can make it a little home." She smiled and reached deeper into the flower bed, stretching for another bug. Her sleeve rode up past her elbow. The bruise sat on her left forearm, approximately 4 centimeters long. Yellowish green, clear finger-shaped pattern consistent with an adult grip. 7 to 10 days old based on the coloration. 31 years documenting child abuse taught me to recognize grip marks the way some people recognize faces. 7 to 10 days old. That meant it happened before Thursday, before Bryce brought her here. The timeline was already establishing itself. I kept my voice steady. Can you lean in closer to the flower? That's perfect. Ivy reached further. The sleeve shifted again. The bruise caught the morning light. Click. Camera timestamp. September 7th, 2024, 9:17 a.m. Like this, she asked. Just like that, sweetheart. Click, click. 9:18 a.m. 9:19 a.m. Every photo time-stamped automatically. Every photo showing a 6-year-old girl reaching for bugs with her grandfather. Every photo documenting the yellowish-green grip mark on her bicep. She didn't notice the bruise was visible, didn't react to it or try to hide it. She was accustomed to it being there. That was somehow worse than the bruise itself. I kept photographing. Ivy with the roly-poly, Ivy examining a flower. Ivy's arm positioned so that when her sleeve shifted, the evidence was clear. A grandfather taking pictures in the garden on a Saturday morning. Nothing suspicious, just photographs. Tell me about your room at home, I said, still clicking. What color are the walls? Pink, she said, watching the bug. But it's old pink, not bright. Do you have a window? One window. It looks at the garage. What about toys? Do you have a lot of toys in your room? She shook her head. Books. I have books, and my bed, and my dresser. That sounds nice. Do you like your room? She thought about this. It's small, but it's okay. My door has a lock so I don't wander at night. I kept the camera steady, kept my voice calm. What kind of lock, sweetheart? She made a sliding motion with her free hand, side to side, like a bolt sliding into place. The kind that goes like this. Daddy locks it from the hallway so I stay safe. From the hallway. From the outside. She said it the way another child might say their room had blue curtains. Just a fact. Her bedroom door locked from the outside so she wouldn't wander at night. So she'd stay safe. She said, so I stay safe, like she believed it. Like being locked in a room was protection instead of prison. I took one more photo. 9:23 a.m. Ivy holding the roly-poly smiling sleeve up past her elbow bruise, clearly visible timestamp running. Yeah, how about we go make some lemonade, I said. Her eyes went wide. Real lemonade, not from the can. The real kind, from actual lemons. Can I help? I'm counting on it. She set the roly-poly carefully back in the garden and ran toward the house, the one-eyed rabbit bouncing where she'd tucked it into her waistband. Her sleeve fell back down, covering the bruise, covering the evidence of adult fingers gripping hard enough to leave marks lasting 10 days. I stood in the garden alone for 30 seconds. The camera was heavy in my hand. The morning sun was warm. The flowers Helen had planted 2 years ago were still blooming. And my granddaughter had just told me she sleeps in a locked room every night. Not locked in with her. Locked in without her. Bolted from the outside. A 6-year-old child confined to a bedroom from the hallway so she doesn't wander. So she stays safe. Safe. I looked at the back of Ivy's head as she disappeared through the kitchen door, excited about making lemonade from real lemons. Then I followed her inside. The photos were time-stamped. September 7th, 2024, 9:17 a.m. through 9:23 a.m. 6 minutes of documentation. The bruise was 7 to 10 days old. Adult grip pattern. The lock was on the outside of her bedroom door. Physical confinement, food deprivation, fear-based conditioning. I'd documented worse injuries on strangers' children over 3 decades and maintained perfect professional composure. I'd written reports that sent people to prison. I'd testified in court with hands that never shook. This was my granddaughter. My hands were still steady. But I knew what I needed to do next. Someone I'd trusted for 20 years needed to hear what I'd found. Someone who'd understand that what I was about to do would tear my family apart and had to be done anyway. I had 2 days before Bryce came back. 2 days to build a case strong enough that they'd never give her back to him. I went inside to make lemonade with a 6-year-old who thought locked doors and hidden food and bruises were just part of being a child. The person I'd trusted for 20 years was Celeste Prescott, and I called her from the back porch while Ivy napped inside. The September heat pressed down like a hand on my shoulders. I dialed the number I'd called 100 times over 2 decades of collaboration. CPS cases, hospital reports, emergency removals in the middle of the night when a child's safety couldn't wait for Monday morning. She picked up on the 3rd ring. I need to make a report, I said, about my son Bryce and his daughter Ivy. The pause lasted 3 seconds. Then her voice changed, not softer, sharper, more focused. Tell me everything. I laid it out the way I'd documented it in the notebook. Friday morning, 6-year-old asks permission to eat food already on her plate, drops to knees on kitchen floor in learned posture. Food hoarding discovered in multiple locations, sock drawer, jacket pockets, under bed. Backpack with degradation patterns suggesting chronic behavior. Saturday morning, yellowish-green bruise on right bicep, 4 centimeters adult, grip pattern, 7 to 10, days old. Bedroom door, at home, locks from outside. Child describes confinement as normal safety measure. Celesta didn't interrupt. Her silence meant she was taking notes. Official notes. The kind that start case files. When I finished, she was quiet for 10 seconds. Not hesitation, calculation. "Vincent," she said finally. I could hear Texas afternoon sounds through her phone's cicadas traffic. She was outside too, keeping this conversation private. "You understand what you're starting. This isn't a stranger's child. This is your son. I know exactly who it is. Your family won't survive this intact. Neither will Bryce. Even if he gets help, even if he changes his life, as he knows it ends the moment I open this file. You understand that? I understand. Do you? Because I've worked with you for 20 years, and in 20 years, I've never seen you waver on a case. But this isn't a case. This is your grandson's father." "Granddaughter," I said. "And she's upstairs right now, napping with a Ziploc bag of stale crackers in her sock drawer because she's learned food might not come. She kneels before meals. She has bruises shaped like adult fingers. She sleeps in a locked room and thinks that's normal. 20 years of working together, every case we collaborated on was someone else's child, someone else's family imploding, not mine." Celeste exhaled. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted back to professional mode. "Document everything," she said. "Photos with timestamps. Write down exactly what she says in her own words. Don't ask leading questions. Don't contaminate the evidence. You know the procedure." "I know. I've used it before, just never on my own son. I'll open the file Monday morning. Official intake. Someone will need to interview Ivy before he picks her up. Can you keep her until Tuesday, Sasparar?" He said 5 days. That's Tuesday. "Good. Don't tell him about this call. Don't give him warning. We'll need to see her while she's still with you while the environment is safe." "Understood." "Vincent," she said, one more time. "There's no going back from this. Once I open that file, once we interview her, once the investigation starts, your family breaks. Maybe permanently. Are you certain?" I looked through the screen door at the house where I'd raised 2 sons, where Helen had died, where Ivy was sleeping in a yellow-walled room with hidden food and a one-eyed rabbit. "I'm certain." "Then document everything. I'll call you Monday." She hung up. I sat on the porch for another 20 minutes, watching the afternoon fade. Then I went inside, made dinner, helped Ivy with a puzzle, read her a story about a rabbit that lived in a garden, put her to bed at 8:30. At 9:30, I went to my office. I needed the property documents, birth certificates, the house deed, Helen's will. If I was going to file for custody, I'd need legal counsel. I'd need to protect assets. I'd need to prove stability. The safe sat behind the bookshelf where it had been for 15 years. Combination lock, no electronic trail. I spun the dial through the sequence I'd memorized decades ago. Right to 18, left to 43, right to 7. The door opened cleanly, no forced entry, no damage. I pulled out the folders one by one. Birth certificates mine, Helen's, Bryce's, Hayes's. Helen's death certificate from 2 years ago. The paper still crisp like the grief. Insurance papers. My medical license. Hayes's college transcripts. The property deed folder sat at the bottom. I opened it. Empty. I checked again, pulled everything out of the safe and spread it across my desk. Went through each folder twice. The house deed was gone. This property, the 4-bedroom suburban home Helen and I bought in 1998 for $180,000, now worth $450,000, raised our sons and buried her from, had a deed that should be in this safe, had always been in this safe. Gone. I gave him the combination. Last November, he said it was for health insurance paperwork in case something happened to me, and he needed to access my Medicare documents. I never questioned it. Only 2 people knew this combination. Me and Bryce. I sat down in my desk chair, the empty folder in my hand, the safe door hanging open like a mouth. Bryce didn't just hurt Ivy. He stole my house. The son who was systematically abusing his own daughter had also defrauded his own father. Not separate crimes, not unrelated betrayals, calculated, planned. The same man who locked a 6-year-old in her bedroom and starved her had stolen his father's home. I remembered that phone call in November. His voice had been warm, concerned. "Dad, I'm helping Saskia set up her father's estate planning, and it got me thinking if something happened to you, I wouldn't even know where your important documents are. Can I get the safe combination just in case?" Just in case. I'd given it to him without hesitation, without suspicion, without realizing I was handing my own son the keys to rob me. I sat in the dark office with the empty safe gaping open. The property deed for this house was gone. Bryce had the combination. Bryce had access. And now I understood what I was really facing: a son who would hurt his own daughter and rob his own father. The question was what else he'd planned. By Sunday morning, I'd need more than a missing deed. I'd need to know what he'd done with it. Sunday morning, I woke to empty safe clarity. If I was fighting a two-front war, I needed evidence for both. I made breakfast for Ivy, fried eggs again. She came to the table without hesitation. This time sat down, picked up her fork. Didn't ask permission, didn't kneel, just ate like a child eating breakfast, though her eyes still tracked the doorway between bites. Progress measured in small absences. "I want to see if those roly-polies are still out there?" I asked when she finished. Her face lit up. "Can we take more pictures?" "As many as you want, sweetheart." She ran to get the one-eyed rabbit from her room while I grabbed the Canon. Sunday morning light was different from Saturday's higher angle, sharper shadows. Better for showing bruise discoloration progression. Better for medical documentation that would hold up in court. We went to the garden. Ivy crouched near the flower bed, immediately searching for bugs. I stood with the camera, letting her move naturally. No staging, no posing. Just a 6-year-old playing while her grandfather photographed her. "Can you reach that yellow flower?" I said. "Little higher." She stretched, her sleeve slid up past her elbow. The bruise caught the morning sun, yellowish green, clear against her skin. Click. September 8th, 2024, 9:17 a.m. At this one, she asked, "Perfect, now the red one beside it." She shifted, reaching, different angle, same bruise, different lighting. Click. 9:18 a.m. I'd photographed evidence on hundreds of children, never one who called me grandpa. I moved position, getting a low angle that caught the Texas sun directly on her arm. The yellow-green discoloration showed clearly 8 to 11 days old, now consistent with Saturday's assessment. No darkening, no fading. The timeline was holding. Ivy turned, reaching down. Her sleeve and sock shifted. The bruises showed in profile 4 centimeters long on her left forearm and another on her right shin. Click, click, click. 9:19 a.m., 9:20 a.m., 9:21 a.m. "Can you pick up that leaf?" I asked. She bent down, reached. Her right arm extended, fully bruised, visible along the entire bicep. Click. 9:23 a.m. High angle showing size relative to her small arm. Close-up revealing the finger pattern detail. You could almost count which fingers had gripped her. Almost. Ivy never asked why so many photos, never covered the bruise, never even glanced at it. That bothered me more than the bruise itself. She found a ladybug on a leaf and gasped with delight. Reached for it carefully, her small hand brushing directly over the bruise as she extended past it. No flinch, no wince, no reaction whatsoever. Just casual contact with a week-old grip mark, and she didn't even register it was there. I photographed that too. The moment of touch, the complete absence of pain response, the normalization. "Grandpa, look." She held up the leaf with the ladybug crawling across it. "It's so tiny." "I see it. Beautiful." Click. 9:35 a.m. Her hand still resting on the bruise, no awareness, no protection. Just a child holding a bug. She touched the bruise, reaching for a ladybug. Didn't flinch, didn't notice. That's how you know it's been happening a long time. In 31 years documenting abuse, the children who didn't react to their own injuries were always the ones who'd had them longest. The ones for whom bruises were part of normal life. The ones who'd learned that pain was just background noise, not worth mentioning, not worth protecting against. "I'm thirsty," Ivy said after a few more minutes. "Can I get water?" "Of course, go ahead." She ran inside, rabbit bouncing against her side. The screen door slammed. I stood alone in the garden with the camera. I pulled up the morning's photos on the screen, scrolled through them slowly. All showing the same injury from Saturday's photos, no progression of color, consistent yellow-green, indicating 8 to 11 days old. Multiple angles, multiple lighting conditions. documentation of zero pain, response to direct contact, evidence that would survive any scrutiny. I went to my office and opened the notebook, added a new entry below Saturday's documentation. September 8th, 2024, 9:15 to 9:45 a.m., follow-up photographic documentation. 23 images, time-stamped. Bruise coloration unchanged from September 7th assessment, consistent with 8 to 11-day age. Confirming injury occurred prior to subject's arrival at residence. Multiple angles and lighting conditions documented. Critical observation subject shows no awareness of injury, no protective behavior, no pain response to direct contact. Hand-made contact with bruised area at 9:35 a.m. while reaching for insect zero reaction. Behavior consistent with chronic exposure to physical discipline. Subject has normalized injury to extent of complete unconscious indifference. I photographed the notebook page, backed it up to the cloud, sent a copy to my encrypted email. Then I uploaded all 23 photos to the computer, organized them in a folder labeled Medical Documentation, the IVH, September 2024, and backed those up 3 different ways: cloud storage, external drive, email attachment. The same protocol I'd used for hospital cases when I knew the evidence might disappear if someone got to the files. I had 4 days of documentation now. Thursday's permission question and kneeling, Friday's food discovery and Hayes' witness account, Saturday's initial bruise photography and lock disclosure, Sunday's systematic evidence building. 23 photographs, 2 days of timestamps, multiple angles showing the same injury with forensic precision. And the most damning evidence of all, a 6-year-old girl who touched her own bruise and didn't even register it, was there. Tomorrow, Bryce would return to collect her. Tomorrow, CPS would call to schedule the interview. Tomorrow, the case would officially begin. Today I had one more piece of documentation to gather, the one that would prove this went beyond child abuse into criminal fraud. The county clerk's office opened at 8 on Monday mornings. I needed to see what Bryce had done with my house. I closed the notebook and looked out the office window at the backyard, where Ivy was playing again, rabbit tucked under one arm, examining something in the grass. 2 wars, one on each front, and I was going to win both. The county clerk's office could wait until Monday. While Ivy napped Sunday afternoon, I pulled up the Dallas County property records on my computer and started tracking what my son had stolen. The database loaded slowly. I typed in my address, the house Helen and I had bought 26 years ago, raised our sons and planned to leave to them when we were gone. The most recent transaction appeared at the top of the list. Transfer recorded August 12, 2024. Property deed now registered to Bryce Harrington. Transferor listed as Vincent Harrington. Transfer type gift deed, no sale price, legal and binding under Texas property law. I stared at the screen. August 12th, less than a month ago. I'd signed away a house worth $450,000 and didn't even know it. I clicked through to the notarized documents, scanned copies of the deed transfer clear and official. My signature sat at the bottom of page 3. Notary seal beside it. Witness signature. Date, August 10th, 2024. I pulled out my phone and called the notary office listed on the document. Got a cell number for emergency contact. It rang 4 times. Yates Notary Service, this is Margaret. Margaret Yates, the notary clerk, who'd witnessed the signature that gave away my house. This is Vincent Harrington, I said. I'm calling about documents notarized at your office on August 10th. Mr. Harrington. Yes, I remember. Your son brought you in. How can I help you? What exactly did I sign that day? Pause. Sir, I don't understand the question. My son told me I was signing medical power of attorney, advance directives, elder care planning documents. Longer pause. Mr. Harrington, she said slowly. Your son brought you in for urgent medical documents? Yes, but the deed transfer was also notarized that same appointment. You signed in my presence. I witnessed the signature and applied the seal. I was told they were healthcare documents. The property deed was clearly labeled at the top of page 1. Gift deed transferring property at Ospatikstasts Emaubo. I know what it was, I said. I'm looking at it now. Thank you. I hung up. I remembered that day. August 10th, Saturday afternoon. Bryce had called. Friday night said he'd been talking to Saskia about estate planning for her father's company. Got him thinking about my situation. What if something happened to me, who had medical power of attorney? Had I set up advance directives since Helen died? He called it elder care planning, said Helen would have wanted me prepared. I believed him. I'd met him at the notary office, signed 3 or 4 documents, barely read them. Why would I? My son was helping me get organized. My son was making sure I was protected. My son was stealing my house. I pulled up the mortgage records next. If he'd transferred the deed in August, what had he done with it? Found it immediately. Mortgage filing, August 15th, 2024, 3 days after the transfer. Borrower Bryce Harrington. Property my address, loan amount $340,000. Lender First Dallas Commercial Bank. I clicked through to the mortgage documents. Loan purpose listed as Real Estate Investment Partnership with Whitfield Development Corporation. The money had gone directly to Bernard Whitfield's company, Saskia's father. The corporate titan Bryce had been desperate to impress at that July party, where he'd denied Ivy dinner for getting her dress dirty. Bryce had stolen my house, mortgaged it for $340,000, and funneled the money into his father-in-law's real estate ventures, all in the span of 5 days. I sat back in my chair, stared at the ceiling, tried to think like a prosecutor instead of a father. What else? What else had he compromised? I pulled up my online banking, checked every account, savings, checking, retirement, all normal. No suspicious transactions, no missing funds. Credit monitoring, no new cards, no inquiries except the mortgage pool in August. Insurance portal, I almost skipped it. Car insurance was on, auto pay health insurance through Medicare, nothing to see. Then I noticed the notification. New policy alert July 2024. I clicked it. I read the beneficiary line 3 times. Bryce Harrington. Bryce Harrington. Bryce Harrington. July. He'd bought life insurance on me in July. 2 months before he dropped Ivy off at my house. 1 month before he stole the property deed. 2 months before I'd discover what he'd done to his daughter. $500,000 if I died. My hands started shaking. I set them flat on the desk, pressed down until they stopped, breathed slowly, counted to 10. Then I pulled out the notebook and started writing. August 10th, 2024. Bryce brings Vincent to notary under pretense of medical power of attorney. Vincent unknowingly signs property deed transfer. Notarized and legal. August 12th, 2024. Deed transfer recorded with Dallas County. Property ownership transferred to Bryce Harrington. August 15th, 2024. Bryce secures $340,000 mortgage against property. Funds transferred to Whitfield Development Corporation, father-in-law's company. Real Estate Investment Partnership. July 15th, 2024. Life insurance policy initiated on Vincent Harrington, $500,000 coverage. Beneficiary Bryce Harrington. Monthly premium auto-deducted from Vincent's account without knowledge or consent. Pattern systematic financial exploitation beginning July, escalating through August, culminating with Ivy's September arrival. Question: was life insurance preparation or plan? I sat at my desk with the policy displayed on screen. $500,000. Beneficiary my son. The son who locked his daughter in her room at night. The son who'd stolen my house and mortgaged it for $333,000. The son who would collect $500,000 if I died. Tomorrow he'd arrive to pick up Ivy. And I finally understood I wasn't just fighting for my granddaughter anymore. I might be fighting for my own life. I needed legal counsel before Bryce walked through that door. I needed someone who understood both family law and fraud. I needed someone who could file emergency custody and property claims simultaneously. I needed help. I needed legal counsel, but first I needed to remember why I was doing this. Sunday evening, Ivy asked if we could watch cartoons before bed, and I realized I'd spent the entire afternoon thinking about death and fraud and forgotten to just sit with her. Of course, I said. Pick whatever you want. We settled on the living room couch, some animated show about talking animals playing on the TV. Ivy sat close, the one-eyed rabbit tucked between us. For 20 minutes, I tried to focus on the screen instead of tomorrow's confrontation, the life insurance policy, the stolen house. Then Ivy laughed. Small laugh, cautious, testing if it was allowed. "Grandpa, this one's funny," she said. "The dog can't catch the ball." "Dogs are like that sometimes," I said. "Not very coordinated." She looked up at me careful. "Did you ever have a dog?" "Once. A beagle named Walter. Had him when your Uncle Hayes was small." "What was he like?" I leaned back into the couch cushions, thinking about Helen's beagle. Walter was the smartest dog in Dallas, and the most stubborn. What did he do? He'd sit on the mail, I said. Every morning, when it came through the slot, Walter would plant himself right on top of it, wouldn't move, just sat there looking at your grandmother until she gave him a treat. Ivy's eyes got wide. Every day? Every single day for 3 years. The mail would pile up underneath him, and Walter would sit there looking proud like he'd caught something. One time, he sat there for 45 minutes waiting for his bribe. Your grandmother finally gave in. She always gave in to Walter. Ivy laughed again. Different this time. Not testing, not cautious. Real. A 6-year-old's laugh, full and unguarded and loud. The sound filled the living room like it hadn't been filled since Helen died. 45 minutes, Ivy said, laughing. Just sitting there. He never gave up. Walter always won. I wish I could have met Walter. He would have liked you. He liked everyone who gave him treats. She laughed again, her whole body relaxing into the couch cushions. Genuine. Free. Just a child being delighted by a story about a stubborn beagle. Helen bought that beagle in 1987, 37 years later, and her stories were making my granddaughter laugh. Some things survive longer than the people who made them. By 8 p.m., Ivy had fallen asleep on the couch, still clutching the rabbit's small smile on her face from laughing. I watched her sleep for 5 minutes. This laugh, this smile, this moment of just being 6 years old, without fear or hunger or locked doors. I would not let her go back to a house where bedroom doors locked from the outside. Not for my house, not for my relationship with Bryce, not for anything. I carried her to the yellow-walled room and tucked her in. She didn't wake, just curled around the rabbit and kept sleeping, that small smile still on her face. I went to my office and pulled up my contacts, found the number I needed. Simone Ballard, family law attorney. 22 years in Dallas, handling the kind of cases that tear families apart to save children. We'd crossed paths twice over the years. Both times I'd been the medical expert witness, providing documentation that helped her win custody cases. I never thought I'd need her services myself. I dialed her office number. Sunday night, 8:15, got the voicemail. You've reached the law office of Simone Ballard. If this is an emergency involving child safety, press 1. Otherwise, please leave a message. I pressed 1. Another recording. Emergency calls will be returned within 2 hours. Please leave detailed contact information and a brief description of the situation. Beep. Simone, this is Vincent Harrington. We've worked together on 2 cases, the Morrison custody case in 2019 and the Brennan case in 2021. I need to file 2 urgent petitions, one for emergency custody of my 6-year-old granddaughter, one for real estate fraud and property transfer reversal. My son Bryce is involved in both. I have full medical documentation on the abuse case. I have property records on the fraud case. He's scheduled to pick her up from my house Monday at noon. I need to see you first thing Monday morning before he arrives. I paused, thought about adding more details, decided against it. My cell number is 2-145-55-0147. Please call as soon as you get this message. I hung up, sat in the dark office, phone in hand. 2 petitions, emergency custody and real estate fraud, both targeting Bryce. You don't get many perfect moments in life. When you do, you protect them, whatever the cost. That laugh tonight, Ivy's full, genuine, unguarded laugh about Walter sitting on the mail for 45 minutes, that was a perfect moment. The first time in 4 days I'd heard her sound like a normal 6-year-old. The first time maybe in months, maybe longer. I wouldn't let it be the last. I opened the notebook and added one final entry for Sunday, September 8th, 2024, 8:15 p.m. Legal counsel contacted. Simone Ballard, family law attorney, 22 years experience. Emergency voicemail left requesting dual petition, filing 1 emergency custody of Ivy Harrington based on documented abuse evidence. 2 property fraud and transfer reversal based on documented theft. Subject Bryce Harrington. Scheduled to retrieve child Monday 12 p.m. Legal protection must be in place before retrieval attempt. Evidence compiled to date. Food hoarding across multiple locations, photographed, documented. Fear-based eating behavior, witnessed, recorded. Physical abuse, bruising consistent with adult grip pattern, 8 to 11 days old. Physical confinement. Bedroom door, locks from exterior, child testimony, documented. Property fraud. Deed transfer under false pretense, August 10th. Recorded August 12th County. Records notary confirmation. Unauthorized mortgage $340,000 against stolen property. August 15th bank records. Life insurance policy. $500,000 on Vincent H. beneficiary. Bryce H. without consent. Insurance records. Timeline: Bryce arrives Monday. Simone must respond before noon. Window approximately 4 hours from office opening to confrontation. I closed the notebook. The message would be waiting for Simone at 8 a.m. Monday. Bryce would arrive at my door by noon. I had 4 hours to get legal protection in place before my son realized I'd just declared war. 4 hours to make sure he couldn't take Ivy back. 4 hours to make sure the laugh I'd heard tonight wasn't the last one. I sat in the dark office listening to the house settle around me. Ivy sleeping upstairs in the yellow room. The one-eyed rabbit tucked under her chin. That small smile from laughing about Walter still on her face. Monday morning would tell me if 4 hours was enough. 4 hours turned into reality faster than I wanted. Bryce's truck pulled into my driveway at 11 Monday morning, exactly when he'd said he would 5 days ago. I watched him through the kitchen window while Ivy played upstairs. He got out, walked to the front door with that familiar jaw-set tightness. I opened before he could knock. "Is she ready?" he asked. She's playing upstairs. Bryce, how did Ivy get the bruise on her right arm?" His expression shifted, impatient to cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yellowish green, 4 centimeters, grip pattern, 7 to 10 days old. You've had her 5 days and now you're making accusations." "I'm asking a question." He stepped closer, voice dropping low and hard. "You need to be careful, Dad. The property deeds are complete, registered in my name, legally binding. So if you want to cause problems with how I raise my daughter, you'll need somewhere else to live, because this house isn't yours anymore." I saw movement in the upstairs window, Ivy's face behind the glass holding the rabbit. "This is still my house, Bryce." "Not according to Dallas County records." I looked at him, saw his father's jaw, his grandfather's jaw, generations of this. "The property freeze application will be filed before 5 p.m. today," I said quietly. "So will the emergency custody petition." Bryce went still. "What?" "I called my attorney Sunday night. Property fraud and child custody, both." "Or Dad, what are you—" "Leave now. Don't come back until the court tells you to." I saw fear replace anger on my son's face. In 38 years, I'd never seen that before. "You're making a mistake. I know exactly what I'm doing. Leave my property." He stood there another 10 seconds, then turned and walked to his truck. Didn't look up at Ivy's window. Didn't ask to say goodbye. Just got in and drove away. I went upstairs. Ivy was still at the window. "Is Daddy mad?" she asked. "He had to leave, sweetheart. He'll come back when it's time." She nodded, went back to playing with the rabbit like she'd already learned that grown-ups don't always tell the truth about when people come back. At 2 p.m., I sat across from Simone Ballard in her Dallas office. 22nd floor view of the city stretching out in afternoon light. I laid out the complete file, forensic notebook with dated entries, time-stamped photographs across 2 days, Hayes's witness statement, food hoarding documentation, property records, mortgage documents, life insurance policy. Simone read for 5 minutes without speaking, set the papers down, picked up her phone. "Cancel my 3 o'clock, she told her assistant. "We need 2 emergency filings before 5. She hung up, looked at me. "This is going to be expensive, Vincent. Dual-track litigation, emergency filings, expert witnesses. We're talking substantial retainer. Whatever it costs." "I'm serious. This could run 6 figures. I pulled out my checkbook. The one from the savings account Bryce had never known about. 31 years at Dallas Children's Hospital. Careful investments. Helen's life insurance. "I have savings," I said, writing. Bryce didn't know about them. He thought the house was all I had. I wrote the check, $25,000, handed it across the desk. Simone looked at it, then at me. "You've thought this through." "Since Friday morning, when she asked permission to eat." "It's Vincent, you understand what you're doing. This isn't just a CPS case. This is your son. Your family won't survive this intact. If we win the fraud case, he'll have a criminal record. His marriage might not survive the scandal. His daughter will grow up knowing her father hurt her, and her grandfather had to stop him." She paused. "Your son won't forgive you for this. Some decisions you make knowing there's no going back. This was one of them." "I know," I said. I've known since my granddaughter knelt on the kitchen floor asking permission to eat breakfast. Simone nodded, picked up the file. Then let's make sure we win. Both cases. She spent the next 2 hours drafting emergency motions. I sat in her conference room, reviewing the evidence one more time, making sure every date was accurate, every timeline consistent. At 4:30, her assistant came in with papers to sign. Emergency petition for temporary custody, Vincent Harrington versus Bryce Harrington. Emergency motion for property transfer, restraining order, Vincent Harrington versus Bryce Harrington. I signed both. The assistant took them to file electronically before 5 p.m. At 4:53, Simone's phone buzzed. "Eddie filed," she said. "Both of them. Bryce will be served tomorrow morning." I looked out her office window at Dallas in the late afternoon, the city where I'd practiced medicine for 31 years, where I'd raised 2 sons, where Helen had died, where my granddaughter had learned to kneel before eating. What happens now? Now Bryce finds out exactly what he's facing. CPS will conduct a formal investigation. Property court will schedule a hearing on the fraud claim. You need to prepare for the fight of your life. I've been preparing since Friday. Good, because by Tuesday morning, your son will know this is war, and so will everyone connected to him. His wife's family has money. Bernard Whitfield won't let this scandal touch his company quietly. You're not just fighting Bryce anymore. Then I'll fight them all. I drove home as the sun set. Ivy was waiting in the yellow-walled room drawing pictures with crayons. The papers had been filed. The war I'd declared Sunday night was now official and irreversible. By Tuesday morning, Bryce would know exactly what he was facing. Tuesday morning, the legal system started moving whether Bryce was ready or not. Celeste called while I was making Ivy breakfast, and I knew from her tone that the machinery I'd set in motion Monday afternoon had engaged overnight. "It's official," she said. "Case opened this morning, home visit scheduled Thursday at Bryce's house." It's surprise visit. He won't know until we knock on the door. School counselor and teacher are providing statements. We're building a complete timeline. I looked at Ivy eating cereal at the table third bowl, no longer watching the doorway. The emergency custody order. Granted, you legally retain her pending the investigation. He can't demand her back. I exhaled. Didn't realize I'd been holding my breath. Thank you, Celeste. Don't thank me yet. Vincent, there's something else you need to know. Her tone shifted, not softer, more careful. Bryce called our main line Monday evening, asked if any anonymous reports had been filed about him. What did you tell him? That CPS is required to keep sources confidential. But here's what bothers me. He didn't ask what the reports said, didn't ask for details, just asked if reports existed. I understood immediately. He knew someone would report. More than that, he knew who. He was checking if you'd actually done it. I thought about Bryce's face Monday when I had told him about the filings, that brief flash of fear before the mask came back. He hadn't been surprised. He'd been calculating. So he's preparing a defense. He's been preparing since before he dropped Ivy off at your house. Vincent, this wasn't impulsive on his part. Whatever's been happening to that child, he knew it was discoverable. He knew someone might notice, and he still brought her to you. He didn't ask what the reports said. He didn't ask who filed them. He knew. He'd known all along someone would notice. Thank you for the warning, I said. Home visit is Thursday 9 a.m. We'll call you after. She hung up. I looked at Ivy eating cereal, small and safe, and unaware that Thursday morning, strangers would walk through her house, cataloging evidence of how she'd been living. Wednesday passed in tense normalcy. Ivy and I made pancakes, played in the garden, watched cartoons. I kept waiting for something to happen. Bryce to call Simone to have urgent news. Something. Nothing. Then Wednesday evening at 6 p.m., an expensive car pulled into my driveway. Saskia Whitfield Harrington emerged in a designer coat that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payment, heels clicking on the walkway, 35 years old, carrying herself like someone who'd never heard the word no. Ivy was upstairs sleeping after dinner. I opened the door. "We need to talk, Mr. Harrington," she said. "You can talk from the porch, or you can leave." She walked past me into the living room anyway, turned with an expression that could strip paint. "I know what you've done, the CPS report, the custody filing, the property claims. Then you know why. I know you're using that child to punish Bryce for whatever family grudge exists between you. I know you're trying to destroy a good man going through a difficult time. A difficult time. Bryce has been under tremendous pressure. The business partnership with my father, Ivy's behavioral issues. You don't understand what he's dealing with. Ivy's behavioral issues. She's a challenging child, manipulative. Bryce has been very patient with her, but she requires firm discipline. I looked at Saskia standing in my living room, hands shaking with anger, or something else I couldn't tell. Your father has the best lawyers in Dallas, she continued. If you persist with these accusations, he'll protect Bryce. You won't win this. Your father will protect his brand, I said quietly. Those are two different things. She paused. You don't know my father. I know men like your father. I've known them my entire career. When scandal threatens their business, they cut loose whatever's causing it, even if it's family. Bryce is married to his daughter. Exactly. And when CPS investigation becomes public record when it threatens Whitfield Development's reputation, your father will have a choice. Stand with Bryce and let the scandal touch his company, or separate Bryce from the family business and minimize damage. Saskia's certainty wavered, just slightly, just enough. I have photographs, I said. Time-stamped. Bruise on your stepdaughter's bicep consistent with adult grip 7 to 10 days old. I have witness statements. I have medical documentation of malnutrition. This isn't a family grudge. This is child abuse. You're lying. I spent 31 years documenting child abuse. I know exactly what I'm looking at. She stood at the door, hand on the knob. Made one more attempt. If you continue this, you'll never see Ivy again. We'll make sure of it. When the scandal hits, I said, your father won't protect Bryce. He'll protect Whitfield Development. The real estate empire he built over 40 years won't be touched by his son-in-law's criminal investigation. Bryce will be cut loose. I saw doubt cross her face for the first time. She'd come to threaten. She left wondering if her own family would stand with her husband. You're wrong about my family, she said, but her voice had changed. I hope I am, for your sake. She left. I watched her expensive car speed away down the suburban street. Then I called Hayes in Austin. He picked up on the second ring. Dad, what's wrong? Book a flight back to Dallas, I said. I need you here. When? Tomorrow if you can. Things are escalating. I'll be there by noon. Thank you, son. I hung up and stood in the dark living room. Saskia had come to threaten me with her father's power and money. I'd sent her home wondering if that power would be turned against her husband instead. Tomorrow, CPS would visit Bryce's house unannounced. Hayes would fly in from Austin, and somewhere in Dallas, Bernard Whitfield would be getting his first phone call about his son-in-law's CPS investigation. Thursday morning would show me if my predictions about Bernard were right. Upstairs, Ivy slept in the yellow-walled room, with the window open 2 inches and no lock on the door, safe for now. But now wouldn't last forever. Eventually, the investigation would conclude. Eventually, a judge would decide. Eventually, Bryce would either lose his daughter, or I'd lose this fight. I wasn't planning to lose. I kept my phone on the kitchen counter while Ivy ate breakfast waiting for Celeste's call about what they'd discovered at Bryce's house. The home visit was scheduled for 9 a.m. Surprise arrival. No advance warning. It was now 11:30 and no call yet. Grandpa, can I play with the hose in the backyard? Ivy asked, cereal bowl empty. Sure, sweetheart. Stay where I can see you from the window. She ran outside, the one-eyed rabbit tucked under her arm. I watched her turn on the hose, laughing as the water sprayed. Just a kid playing in the yard on a Thursday morning. Normal. The phone sat on the counter like a live thing. 11:30 became 11:40. I washed Ivy's bowl, wiped down the counter, stared at the phone. It rang at 11:47. Vincent, Celeste said, her voice careful, professional, the tone she used when findings were bad. Hold on, let me go somewhere Ivy can't hear. I walked to my office, closed the door, sat down at the desk. Okay, tell me. We just finished at Bryce's house. Vincent, the kitchen cabinets have electronic combination locks. I closed my eyes. All of them. All except one. The unlocked cabinet has cereal and granola bars. That's it. Everything else, canned goods, snacks, bread, anything with calories locked behind combination codes. Before I tell you exactly what CPS found in that house, are you still with me? Comment A if you think this gets worse, or B if you think this is as bad as it gets. And add one reason why in 5 to 10 words. The bedroom door, Celeste continued. It has a slide bolt on the outside. Vincent, the mounting screws still have the manufacturer's sticker on them. Recently installed. Within the last few months, we estimate. The hardware is new. The room itself is sparse bed, single lamp, without a shade, books, but no other toys. No dresser for clothes, just a hamper. I thought about the yellow-walled room upstairs where Ivy slept now. Window open, no lock, stuffed rabbit on the pillow. "There's more," Celeste said. "We ordered an immediate medical evaluation. Ivy is 15th percentile for weight. The pediatrician says it's consistent with chronic insufficient caloric intake over 12 to 18 months. 12 to 18 months. She was 6 years old. That was a quarter of her life spent learning food wasn't guaranteed. Teacher corroboration, I asked. Renee Stafford confirmed 2 months of systematic food hoarding in jacket pockets. Started the first week of school early September before you had any contact with Ivy. School counselor Darren Lowe's mid-September report corroborates the timeline independently. Rules out staging. Completely. No possible way you could have orchestrated evidence that predates your involvement by weeks. The timeline is ironclad, Vincent. Electronic locks. External bedroom bolt with manufacturer stickers still on. Medical documentation of chronic malnutrition. Teacher and counselor witness statements. This isn't borderline. This is systematic. I looked out the office window at the backyard, where Ivy was still playing with the hose, soaking the grass, laughing. What happens next? It's formal charges recommendation by end of week. We'll have medical reports finalized. Property court will run parallel. You should prepare for both proceedings to escalate quickly. Thank you, Celeste. Vincent, one more thing. When we arrived this morning, the house was pristine, spotless, like someone had spent days preparing for inspection. But they didn't think to remove the stickers from the Bolt hardware. Didn't think we'd look that closely. He was prepared, just not prepared enough. Exactly. I'll call you Friday with a formal recommendation. She hung up. I sat in the office for another 10 minutes looking at nothing. The evidence was crushing. Electronic combination locks on kitchen cabinets. A 6-year-old who needed permission codes to access food in her own home. A bedroom door that locked from the hallway with hardware so new the stickers were still on. Bryce thought he could hide it, but the truth was finally coming to light. I needed to keep my focus. Tomorrow Hayes would arrive from Austin, and together we would build the final wall of this case. Bernard Whitfield's decision would come Monday. First, Hayes needed to meet Ivy. When we pulled into the driveway Saturday afternoon, Ivy was in the front yard with the rabbit, and Hayes went very still in the passenger seat, seeing how small she looked. I forgot, he said quietly. I forgot how small 6 is. He got out of the car slowly, didn't rush toward her, waited for her to look up from whatever she was examining in the grass. When she did, Hayes crouched down, not standing over her, not towering, down at her eye level. Hi, Ivy, he said. I'm Uncle Hayes. You remember me from your birthday? She nodded, clutched the rabbit tighter. You sent me the rabbit, she said, quiet voice. That was your Grandma Helen's idea, but yeah, I helped pick him out. Then Hayes did something I hadn't expected. He sat, not crouching, fully sitting on the grass cross-legged, making himself smaller instead of bigger, making himself less threatening. The exact opposite of everything I'd seen Bryce do. What's his name? Hayes asked. Ivy looked at the rabbit, then at Hayes sitting on the ground like a kid himself. Gerald. That's a good name for a rabbit. Dignified. She almost smiled. I watched my younger son sit in the grass with my granddaughter, and I thought about generational cycles and how sometimes they break just because one person decides to sit down instead of loom. That evening I cooked, made enough for 3, set up proper table plates, napkins, forks in the right places. Hayes helped Ivy set everything out, talking about which fork goes where and why anyone cares. It's just so people know what to expect, he was saying. Like a game with rules, makes it easier. What if you use the wrong fork? Ivy asked. Then you use the wrong fork. Nobody actually cares except at fancy dinners, and those are boring anyway. She asked more questions, voice getting less quiet with each one. Where did forks come from? Why are spoons called spoons? Can you eat soup with a fork? Hayes answered every single one seriously, like they were the most important questions in the world. Dinner had conversation, had sound, had warmth. 3 generations at one table, Ivy eating without watching the doorway, Hayes telling stories about learning to ride a bike and falling into rose bushes. Your grandma had to pull thorns out for an hour, he said. Did it hurt? Ivy asked, laughing. Only my pride. The sound of Ivy laughing. I hadn't heard this house sound like a home in 2 years. After Ivy's bedtime, Hayes and I sat at the kitchen table, with coffee gone cold in our mugs. Oh, Dad, he said finally. How long has this been happening? I looked at the empty plate Ivy had cleaned earlier, the one she didn't ask permission to touch. Long enough she thinks it's normal, I said. That's the part that scares me most. Not that it happened, but that she doesn't know it's wrong. Like Jesus, Dad. The official written report sitting on Simone's desk made the reality even colder. The black ink on the pages confirmed everything Celeste had whispered over the phone, the combination codes on the cabinets, the external bolts. But seeing the medical examiner's charts in high resolution was a different blow. Ivy was in the 15th percentile for weight, vitamin D deficiency, iron deficiency, chronic insufficient caloric intake for 12 to 18 months minimum, a quarter of her life. I sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk. She's 6 years old, I said. That's a quarter of her life. That's exactly what I'll tell the judge. 12 to 18 months, a quarter of her life. The number that broke my heart would be the number that saved her. Simone pulled out another folder. Legal strategy notes. Defense analysis. Vincent Bryce's attorney, Rodney Townsend, very good, very expensive, will attack your credibility. He'll focus on family distance. How often you saw Ivy before this intervention. He'll argue you barely knew her, that this is about property fraud, and you're using the child to justify it. I know the argument. This number destroys it. She tapped the medical report. 12 months ago, you weren't involved. You hadn't seen Ivy in months. The abuse was already chronic. The malnutrition was already established. This proves your observations weren't personal vendetta. They were clinical assessment backed by independent medical evidence. I looked at the numbers on the page. 15th percentile, 12 to 18 months, vitamin deficiencies, growth stunting. The defense will try to paint you as an angry father, weaponizing accusations, Simone continued. This report shows you were a pediatrician recognizing documented abuse. This timeline is your credibility, Vincent. It proves everything you said was true before you ever said it. When do we file? The formal charges go to the DA Friday. Your custody petition is already active. Property fraud is separate track, but running parallel. Everything converges in about 3 weeks. And Bryce? He's retained Townsend. Expensive. Aggressive. But Townsend's good at defending the defensible. I don't know how he plans to defend electronic locks in a medical report showing 18 months of starvation. I sat in Simone's office staring at the medical report. 12 to 18 months of systematic starvation. A quarter of Ivy's 6 years, learning that food wasn't guaranteed, that asking for more meant punishment, that survival meant hiding crackers in sock drawers. The number was devastating. It was also irrefutable. And Rodney Townsend would have no answer for it when we walked into court. But first, the tycoon would make his move. Bernard Whitfield had built a real estate empire over 40 years. He hadn't done it by letting scandals touch his brand. The medical report would reach him. The CPS findings would reach him. And he'd make the calculation every businessman makes: protect the asset or cut the loss. Bryce was about to learn which one he was. Bernard Whitfield made his calculation Monday, but Sunday night before the full case filing, I made mine. I was searching my office for old property records, something Simone needed for tomorrow's filing hands, moving automatically through files while my mind rehearsed the court appearance. Bottom drawer of my father's old desk. Yellowed documents, tax records from the 80s, Helen's will. Then my fingers brushed the corner of a leather photo album. I pulled it out. Hadn't seen it in years. Musty smell, the leather soft with age. The desk lamp created a circle of light in the dark office. Rest of the house silent. I opened the album. Wedding photos, Helen in white. Me in a suit that didn't fit right. Our boys as babies. Hayes learning to walk. Bryce's first day of school. Page 12. I stopped. Bryce at age 8. Soccer uniform, smiling at the camera. Helen must have taken it. I could see her handwriting on the back. September 1994. My eyes locked on his left arm. A bruise. Dark. Unmistakable. 4 centimeters long. Upper bicep. Memory crashed over me like cold water. I asked him, "What happened to your arm?" Bryce looked down. Didn't answer. Walked away and went back to college Monday morning and told myself it wasn't my business. Told myself Dad was strict but not cruel. Told myself Bryce was fine. The photo trembled in my hands. My phone vibrated. Text from Simone. Medical examiner confirmed timeline. CPS forensics ready for tomorrow's filing. We're going to win this case. I stared at the message. Win what? Win the case. Win custody. Win the moral high ground. I looked back at the photo of 8-year-old Bryce. Then I pulled out the medical report from my desk, the one with the photos of Ivy's bruise, laid it beside the album. Left arm, upper bicep, 4 centimeters, yellowish green in Ivy's photos, dark purple in Bryce's. Same arm, same age, same pattern. The same. I didn't just fail to protect Bryce. I enabled the cycle to continue to the next generation. I stayed silent because my father taught me that silence equals loyalty. That family protects family by not asking questions, by not opening doors, by walking away from the sounds of discipline. And now Ivy was caught in the same loop I'd created 30 years ago when I walked away from that door. I didn't just witness abuse. I taught Bryce that silence was the family code. I showed him at age 8 at the exact age Ivy was, now that adults don't intervene, that bruises get explained away, that discipline and abuse are words people use interchangeably, and nobody corrects them. The photo and the medical report lay side by side on my desk, matching bruises like mirror images across 30 years. My breathing became shallow. The desk lamp flickered. I looked up. Through the window, dawn was breaking, gray light replacing the yellow lamp glow. I'd been sitting here all night. 6 hours had passed without me noticing. The case files for tomorrow's hearing spread across my desk untouched, cold coffee mug at my elbow, my neck stiff from sitting, birds starting to sing outside. I stood up, legs unsteady, walked upstairs. Ivy's bedroom door was open. She was still asleep, clutching the one-eyed rabbit hair spread across the pillow. Morning light coming through the curtains, soft and gentle. I stood in the doorway, the same position I'd stood 30 years ago outside Bryce's room, hand on the doorknob, almost opening it, almost intervening. But this time, I didn't walk away. I stepped inside, knelt beside Ivy's bed, the carpet soft under my knees. She breathed slowly, peacefully, the rabbit's worn fur under her chin. I whispered, so quiet she wouldn't wake. I'm sorry I didn't protect your father, but I'm going to protect you. The loop stops here. Ivy stirred, didn't wake, just pulled the rabbit closer. I stood, tucked the blanket around her shoulders, walked out, downstairs, picked up my phone. Texted Simone, add one more item to tomorrow's filing. I'm requesting full supervised visitation review. No more halfway measures. This isn't about property anymore. She responded immediately despite the early hour. That escalates to full custody fight. You sure? I looked at the photo album still open on my desk. Bryce at age 8. The bruise I'd seen and explained away and forgotten for 30 years. I'm sure, I typed back. The loop stops here. This wasn't just about property fraud. Wasn't just about medical reports and CPS investigations and court filings. This was about breaking a cycle I'd helped create when I was 18 years old and walked away from a door because I'd been taught that silence was loyalty. Bryce learned from my father how to hurt, but he also learned from me how to hide it, how to explain it away, how to make it normal. I taught him that bruises get photographed and nobody asks the right questions. Not anymore. Tomorrow I'd walk into court and request full custody. Not temporary, not supervised visits with conditions. Full custody with the medical timeline as evidence. With the matching bruises 30 years apart as proof that this cycle had been running long before I'd noticed. I'd failed Bryce when he was 8 years old. I wouldn't fail Ivy. The loop stopped here, in this house, with this generation, with this choice. I closed the photo album, put it back in the drawer, not hiding it, just done with it. Then I went to make breakfast for my granddaughter, and when she came downstairs, I'd tell her good morning. I'd make her eggs. I'd let her eat without asking permission. And tomorrow, I'd make sure she'd never have to ask permission to be safe again. Simone's office smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. I'd expected just the two of us going over witness lists. But when I walked in at 9 that Thursday morning, 2 strangers were already seated at her conference table. One was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a beaded chain. The other was a younger man with a leather messenger bag balanced on his knees. Vincent, meet Renee Stafford and Darren Lowe, Simone said, gesturing without looking up from her notes. They've been waiting to talk to you. I froze in the doorway. Waiting, I didn't know we had... They contacted me directly, Simone interrupted, after they heard about the emergency custody filing. Sit down. The woman extended her hand. Renee Stafford, I've been Ivy's first grade teacher for 6 weeks now, 23 years in the district. Her grip was firm, professional. I should have called CPS myself in September. I didn't. I'm here to fix that. The younger man stood. Darren Lowe, school counselor, I did file a report, September 14th, 9 days before you contacted them, actually. My chest tightened. 9 days before CPS lost it in the system, Darren said flatly. Or buried it. I documented everything: Ivy's withdrawal patterns, the food hoarding, the way she flinches when anyone raises their voice. I filed. They did nothing. Simone slid a manila folder across the table. Darren's going to testify that the school flagged this weeks before you did. Renee's going to testify about behavioral patterns she observed starting the first week of school. Both of them blow apart any narrative that you're manufacturing evidence. I opened the folder. Darren's report was dated September 14th, 2024, stamped received by the county. 7 single-spaced pages detailing observations from the first 2 weeks of school. Ivy hiding granola bars in her desk. Ivy asking if she could sleep in the nurse's office. Ivy drawing pictures of stick figures locked in rooms. Why didn't CPS follow up? I asked. Because Bryce is white employed and lives in a nice neighborhood, Renee said quietly. Because reports like Darren's get triaged behind drug cases and visible injuries. Because the system's broken. Outside the window, a garbage truck beeped as it reversed down the alley. The sound was sharp, rhythmic, relentless. Renee pulled out her own notebook, spiral-bound, filled with handwritten observations. September 9th. Ivy ate an entire week's worth of cafeteria breakfast in one sitting. Threw up in the bathroom. When I asked if she was okay, she said her daddy forgot to give her dinner the night before. September 16th. Bruise on her left forearm, same place you photographed. When I asked how it happened, she said she fell. But she wouldn't look at me when she said it. I stared at the date. September 16th. The same bruise I'd photographed during her 5-day stay with me, the one Bryce's attorney would inevitably claim I caused. You documented this before she came to stay with me, I said. Before, during, and after, Renee confirmed. The bruise was already fading by the time she came back to school on September 24th. I photographed it on the 16th, time-stamped backed up to the cloud. Simone leaned forward. Which means when Rodney Townsend tries to claim you, stage those injuries, we'll have independent corroboration from a mandated reporter with no connection to you. When's the deposition? I asked. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. The deposition room was smaller than I'd imagined, just a conference table, a court reporter, and Rodney Townsend sitting across from me like a man who'd already won. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with silver cufflinks and a Rolex that caught the overhead lights every time he gestured. Mr. Harrington. He began not bothering with pleasantries. You had custody of Ivy for 5 days in late September, 5 days during which these alleged injuries appeared. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Simone started to object, but I raised my hand. The bruise on Ivy's left forearm was photographed by her teacher on September 16th, I said calmly. 3 days before Ivy came to stay with me. The bruise on her right shin was documented by the school nurse on September 12th, 7 days before she came to stay with me. Would you like the time-stamped photographs, or should I also provide the sworn affidavits from 2 mandated reporters who observed these injuries while Ivy was still in your client's care? Rodney's jaw tightened. Photographs can be altered. Timestamps can be manipulated. The room went silent except for the court reporter's fingers on the stenograph. Rodney leaned back, his Rolex clicking against the table edge. We'll continue this in court, Mr. Harrington. And when we do, I promise you'll regret weaponizing your grandchild in a custody battle you cannot win. This isn't about winning, I said. This is about a little girl who hides food in her desk and asks teachers if she can sleep at school. If you want to make this about me, go ahead. But every piece of evidence points in one direction, and we both know it. I stood to leave, but Rodney wasn't finished. One more thing, he said softly. Your son's willing to go public, national news. Grandfather weaponizes false abuse claims to steal grandchild. How do you think that plays for your reputation? I turned back. Tell him to do it. And while he's on camera, ask him to explain why his daughter's teacher filed a CPS report before I ever got involved. I walked out. Simone followed, heels clicking on tile. I was still sitting in my car outside the parking garage, Simone's call still echoing in my head. What do you mean? Bernard learned about the CPS case through private channels yesterday. This morning, he froze Bryce's stake in Whitfield Holdings. Effective immediately. He's hired separate counsel to distance the family from any scandal. I closed my eyes. Bernard Whitfield, Saskia's father, the 62-year-old tech tycoon who'd built a semiconductor empire and treated family like a brand to protect. I'd met him exactly twice. Both times he'd talked about legacy and risk management as if they were the same thing. Protecting the brand, not the person, I said quietly. Exactly. Bryce sacrificed everything to impress that man. The house, the cars, the leveraged investments. All of it to prove he belonged in the Whitfield circle. Now, Bernard's cutting him loose like dead weight. The parking garage was silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I'd told Bryce this would happen. 3 years ago, at Thanksgiving, when he'd explained the Whitfield Holdings stake like it was a lottery ticket. I'd said, "Bernard doesn't strike me as the forgiving type." Bryce had laughed. "You don't know him like I do, Dad." Turns out neither of us did. "There's more," Simone continued. "Saskia received an ultimatum. I waited. 48 hours, file for divorce or lose her $8 million trust fund and her position in the family. Bernard's lawyer delivered it personally this morning. Will she choose her husband? I asked, though I already knew. She called me 2 hours ago, in tears, asking about custody implications if she divorces Bryce before the hearing. Vincent, she's already retained a divorce attorney. Of course she had. Saskia was 32, blonde, beautiful, and had never worked a day in her life because she'd never needed to. The trust fund wasn't just money, it was her identity. Bryce had chosen wealth over his daughter. Now, Saskia was choosing wealth over her marriage. The patterns replicated like fractals. When's she filing? I asked. Tomorrow morning. She wanted to know if it would hurt Bryce's custody case. I told her Bryce doesn't have a custody case anymore. Simone kept talking procedural details, court schedules, witness prep, but I was barely listening. Outside the windshield, the parking garage stretched into shadow, concrete pillars, painted lines, everything built on foundations that could crack. That night, I sat in Ivy's darkened bedroom, watching her sleep. She was curled on her side knees, tucked up. Gerald, the one-eyed stuffed rabbit, clutched under her chin. 6 years old. The same age Bryce had been when I'd first noticed something was wrong, but didn't know how to name it. The same age when the loop should have been broken. Her nightlight cast soft shadows across the yellow walls. She breathed slowly, evenly, peaceful in a way she never was during the day. Tomorrow, a judge would decide her future. Tomorrow, Rodney Townsend would try to destroy my credibility in front of a courtroom. Tomorrow, the generational cycle would either break or continue. She didn't know any of it. She just knew Grandpa's house had a purple bedroom and nobody locked the door. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. I stepped into the hallway and answered. Dad. Bryce's voice was barely recognizable. Hoarse hollow, like he'd been crying or screaming or both. Bryce, I said carefully. Are you okay? 3 weeks, he said. Court-ordered therapy, 3 weeks. The therapist, Dr. Brennan, she asked me to write something down. I waited. She asked me to list my discipline rules, the ones I use with Ivy, not just what I do but why, the reasons behind them. She said most parents can't articulate their philosophy, but she wanted me to try. My chest tightened. I wrote 4 pages, Dad, front and back, every rule, every reason. Why I don't let her waste food. Why I lock the door when she misbehaves. Why I check her homework 3 times. Why I don't let her cry at bedtime. His voice cracked. I brought it to session yesterday. Dr. Brennan read it. Then she pulled out a book, some parenting manual from the 1960s. She opened to a chapter called Discipline Without Weakness. Started reading it out loud. Bryce, every single line, Dad, word for word. My grandfather's philosophy verbatim. I didn't even know. I thought those were my rules, my reasons, but they were his. All of them. 30 years, and I've been raising Ivy exactly the way he raised you. 4 pages. 30 years condensed into 4 pages of inherited cruelty. I leaned against the hallway wall phone, pressed to my ear, unable to speak. I told Dr. Brennan I didn't remember reading that book. Bryce continued, his voice shaking. She said I didn't have to. She said trauma writes its own manual. You just follow the script without knowing there's a script. Through the doorway, I could see Ivy's small shape under the blanket. Gerald's single-button eye catching the nightlight. I'm not contesting tomorrow, Bryce said quietly. Rodney doesn't know yet. I'll tell him in the morning. But I wanted you to know first. My throat closed. Dad, Bryce said, and his voice broke completely. Do you know what your son is like? Do you know what kind of person I am? I closed my eyes. 38 years. 38 years of watching Bryce build walls and call them discipline. Watching him chase Bernard Whitfield's approval like it was oxygen. Watching him measure his worth in assets and control. And I'd told myself I didn't understand. I'd told myself he was just ambitious, just strict, just different from me. But I'd known. Somewhere deep I'd known. I just hadn't wanted to see it until Ivy's bruises made it impossible to look away. Now I know, I said quietly. I wish I'd known sooner. Bryce was silent for a long moment. Then, take care of Ivy, the way she deserves. Bryce, the way I never learned how. The line went dead. I stood in the dark hallway, phone in my hand, listening to the silence. Through the doorway, Ivy shifted slightly, Gerald tucked closer under her chin, her breathing steady. Safe. Unaware that tomorrow I'd win custody without a fight. Unaware that the victory tasted like ash. Unaware that breaking the loop meant losing my son. The courtroom smelled like brown carpet and institutional silence. My hand trembled on the oak railing as Hayes steadied my shoulder. Morning had come too fast, 3 hours of sleep, Bryce's broken voice still echoing in my head. Now, we were here. Simone walked ahead of us, briefcase in hand, heels clicking on tile. At the defense table, Bryce sat alone. No Saskia, no Bernard Whitfield's expensive entourage. Just Bryce in a navy suit, eyes down, hands folded on the table like a man already convicted. Rodney Townsend arranged his files with confident precision, silver cufflinks catching the overhead lights. He glanced at me, once nodded slightly, then returned to his notes. He didn't know yet. Bryce hadn't told him. The side door opened. Judge Stella Redmond entered, 60 years old, with a silver bob and reading glasses on a thin chain, carrying the quiet authority of 25 years on the family court bench. She settled into her chair, opened the case file, and read for 4 silent minutes without looking up. When she finally raised her eyes, the courtroom felt smaller. This court is now in session, she said, her voice calm and precise. Harrington versus Harrington, case number FC-2024-8847. Ms. Ballard, you may proceed. Judge Redmond nodded. Continue. Simone clicked the remote. The courtroom monitor lit up with the first photograph, Ivy's left forearm, small and pale, against the white examination paper, purple-blue bruises in the unmistakable shape of adult finger marks. Another click. The medical report filled the screen, technical language, hemoglobin breakdown, timelines, precise dating. Judge Redmond made a note. Noted, continue. Simone presented 3 more photographs, bruises on Ivy's shin, her right shoulder, the back of her hand. Each one cataloged, dated, cross-referenced with the timeline. No theatrics, just facts stacking like bricks in a wall. Then Simone picked up her phone. Exhibit E, she said quietly. Audio recording, 15 seconds, captured September 21st, during Ivy's stay with Mr. Harrington. Your Honor, I'm going to play this once. I won't provide commentary. She pressed play. Ivy's voice came through the speakers, small, whispered, terrified. Grandpa, will I be punished for eating this? A pause. Then the distinct, unmistakable sound of small knees hitting hardwood floor. Simone stopped the recording. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. My hands rested on the plaintiff's table. 31 years of surgery, steady hands that had sutured arteries and repaired hearts. Right now, they were shaking. Judge Redmond's expression didn't change, but she removed her reading glasses slowly. No further comment on this exhibit, Ms. Ballard. No, Your Honor, Simone said. The recording speaks for itself. I glanced at Bryce. He stared at the table jaw, clenched shoulders rigid. Rodney leaned toward him, whispered something. Bryce didn't respond. Call your first witness, Judge Redmond said. Renee Stafford took the stand in a gray cardigan and simple pearl earrings. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat with the practiced calm of someone who'd testified before. One Stafford. Simone began, how long have you been teaching? 23 years, 2nd grade, same district. And when did you first observe concerning behavior from Ivy Harrington? Emmomit insibofetbom deforpectaor. Renee opened her spiral-bound notebook. September 8th, first full week of school. Ivy ate an entire week's worth of breakfast in one sitting, then got sick in the bathroom. When I asked if she was okay, she said her daddy forgot to give her dinner the night before. What else did you document? 6 incidents of food hoarding in 3 weeks. Crackers hidden in her desk, granola bars in her backpack. No lunch bag ever provided. I contacted the defendant multiple times. He dismissed my concerns as dramatic. Simone stepped closer. When did you first document these concerns in writing? September 8th, Renee said firmly. Mr. Vincent Harrington wasn't even in Dallas yet. Rodney made a note but didn't object. Darren Lowe testified next leather messenger bag, same quiet professionalism. He presented a manila folder stamped with the county seal. This is the mandatory report I filed September 14th at 2:47 p.m., he said. 7 single-spaced pages documenting behavioral concerns, food insecurity patterns, and fear responses observed during the first 2 weeks of school. Simone took the folder. And when did Mr. Vincent Harrington first contact CPS? According to CPS records, September 23rd, 9 days after my report, September 14th. The date hung in the courtroom like a verdict already delivered. Darren continued. I documented Ivy asking if she could sleep in the nurse's office. I documented drawings of stick figures locked in rooms. I documented her flinching when anyone raised their voice. I filed the report because I'm mandated to file when I observe indicators of abuse. CPS logged it and did nothing. Why didn't they follow up? Simone asked. You'd have to ask them, Darren said quietly. But reports get triaged. This one fell through the cracks. Rodney stood. Objection, Your Honor. This testimony is circumstantial and potentially coordinated retroactively. Judge Redmond removed her glasses and looked at him for 3 full seconds. Overruled, Counselor, she said. The timeline is independently verified by institutional records bearing timestamps and digital signatures. These reports were filed before Mr. Vincent Harrington ever contacted CPS. Rodney's jaw tightened. Your Honor, I must protest. Overruled, Mr. Townsend. Judge Redmond's voice didn't rise, but it carried weight. Continue, Miss Ballard. Rodney sat down slowly. For the first time since I'd met him in that deposition room, his confident facade cracked. His hands gripped the edge of the table knuckles white. I saw it. Hayes saw it. Simone saw it. The defense was starting to collapse. Rodney stood, voice sharp and controlled. Your Honor, I'm calling the defendant's staging theory into evidence. Mr. Vincent Harrington had means motive and 5 days alone with the child. Simone didn't flinch. Judge Redmond gestured for him to continue. The plaintiff is a retired physician, Rodney said, pacing toward the jury box, except there was no jury, just Judge Redmond watching with steady eyes. 67 years old. How steady are those hands after 3 decades away from practice 5 unsupervised days with a 6-year-old child? Accidents happen, or perhaps not accidents at all. He turned toward me. Motive: a house fraudulently transferred out of his name, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The only path to reclaim it: custody of the granddaughter. And what does custody require? Evidence of abuse. Convenient. Hayes's hand tightened on my shoulder. I kept my face still. 5 days, Rodney repeated. September 19th through 23rd, alone, unsupervised. And suddenly, when the child returns home, we have photographs. We have documentation. We have a grandfather building a case. Simone stood. Your Honor, the prosecution calls Dr. Conrad Fletcher, forensic pathologist. Dr. Fletcher was in his early 60s, gray beard trimmed, close wire-rimmed glasses perched on a sharp nose. 30 years analyzing injury patterns had given him the air of someone who dealt in facts, not theories. He carried a leather portfolio and placed it on the witness stand with deliberate care. Dr. Fletcher. Simone began. You reviewed the photographic evidence in this case. What did your analysis reveal? Dr. Fletcher opened the portfolio and pulled out a series of enlarged photographs mounted on foam board. The first showed Ivy's bruise in full color purple, fading to yellowish green at the edges. Bruise pigmentation follows predictable degradation based on hemoglobin breakdown. He said, his voice calm and precise. Fresh bruises appear red or purple. After 3 to 5 days, biliverdin converts the color to green. After 7 to 10 days, bilirubin shifts it toward yellow-brown. He pointed to the photograph. This bruise photographed September 23rd shows significant yellowish-green coloration. That indicates it was 7 to 10 days old at the time of photography. Simone stepped closer. Mr. Harrington's visit with Ivy ended September 5th. The photograph was taken September 23rd. What does the science tell us? Dr. Fletcher adjusted his glasses. If we work backward from September 23rd and account for 7 to 10 days of degradation, the injury occurred between September 13th and 16th, 4 to 8 days after Mr. Harrington's visit ended. He produced a second chart, a timeline with color-coded bars showing visit dates, injury dates, and photographic dates. Mathematics, not opinion, Science, not theory. There is no scenario, Dr. Fletcher continued, in which an injury sustained during Ivy's time with her father in mid-September would present this pigmentation spectrum on September 23rd. The timeline doesn't support staging. It refutes it. Judge Redmond made a note. Mr. Townsend, your cross-examination. Rodney stared at the charts for 10 seconds. The courtroom held its breath. His confident facade had cracked in the last session. Now it shattered completely. The staging theory died without a word. No questions, Your Honor, he said finally, voice flat. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Bryce walked to the stand slowly. He didn't look at me. His shoulders were tight, hands clenched at his sides. He placed his palm on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat with his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. Mr. Harrington, Simone began, her voice quiet but firm. Did you restrict your daughter's meals as punishment? Yes. Did you lock her bedroom door at night? Yes. Did you require her to kneel on hardwood floors as discipline? Bryce's jaw tightened. Yes. Simone paused, let the admission settle. Then, Mr. Harrington, did your father use these same methods on you as a child? Rodney shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor, irrelevant to the current case. Judge Redmond removed her glasses. Overruled. The witness will answer. Bryce's shoulders trembled. His eyes were wet. He looked at me for the first time since taking the stand. Yes, he said quietly. My father did. The courtroom went silent. I felt Hayes's hand tighten on my shoulder again, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I watched my son confess to becoming his own father, the loop I'd vowed to break now exposed in open court. I learned it from him, Bryce continued unprompted. The rules, the discipline, the reasons. I thought I was just being a good parent. I didn't know I was doing it. I didn't know until Dr. Brennan showed me. Judge Redmond held the moment for 5 silent seconds. Then she made another note and looked at Simone. Does the prosecution have additional witnesses? One more, Your Honor, Simone said. In closed session, Ivy Harrington. The adjacent testimony room had a monitor and an audio feed. Hayes, Simone, and I sat in chairs facing the speaker. On the other side of the wall, a forensic interviewer, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, sat across from Ivy at a small table with crayons and paper. Hi, Ivy, the interviewer said gently. I'm Ms. Caldwell. I'm going to ask you some questions. Okay, there's no wrong answers. Just tell me what you think. Ivy nodded. She was wearing the purple dress Hayes had bought, her hair pulled into 2 braids. She looked so small. Where do you feel safest, Ivy? Ivy didn't hesitate. At Grandpa's house. And why is that? Because I get to eat there. Hayes made a small sound beside me, half sob, half exhale. Can you tell me about your bedroom at your dad's house? Ms. Caldwell asked. Ivy picked up a purple crayon and started drawing a rectangle. It has yellow walls and a bed and my stuffed rabbit Gerald. The door locks from the outside. From the outside? Yes, but that's normal, for when I'm bad. She said it calmly, matter of fact, like describing the weather. Hayes stood abruptly and walked into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind him. Simone reached over and squeezed my hand, her grip tight enough to hurt. On the speaker, Ivy kept drawing. A rectangle, a door, a lock on the outside. That's normal, she said again, softer this time. That's just how it is. 5 days of waiting, compressed into the moment, Judge Redmond walked through the door. My hands were steady on the table. Hayes sat beside me, breathing slowly. Across the aisle, Bryce sat alone, no Saskia, no Rodney beside him anymore. Just Bryce in the same navy suit, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on nothing. The same brown carpet, the same oak benches, but everything felt different. Judge Redmond entered with a file folder in her hand, reading glasses already on. She settled into her chair and opened the folder without ceremony. This court is ready to deliver findings in Harrington versus Harrington. She said, her voice calm and precise. I've reviewed testimony, forensic evidence, and witness statements over the past 5 days. What follows are my findings of fact. Hayes leaned close. Steady, Dad, he whispered. Judge Redmond adjusted her glasses and began reading. The court finds evidence of systematic abuse through food restriction, causing documented malnutrition and hoarding behaviors in the minor child. School records corroborate a pattern extending minimum 8 months. The court finds evidence of physical confinement via exterior door locks, creating what multiple witnesses described as prison-like conditions for a 6-year-old child. The court finds evidence of fear-based discipline resulting in measurable psychological trauma documented independently by mandated reporters prior to Mr. Vincent Harrington's custody petition. She turned a page. The defense theory of evidence staging has been refuted by forensic pigmentation analysis, placing injury timelines outside Mr. Vincent Harrington's period of custody. The timeline has been independently verified by institutional records bearing digital time stamps. No evidence supports external manipulation. The pattern of abuse is clear, systematic, and ongoing. Simone squeezed my hand under the table. Across the aisle, Bryce didn't move. Judge Redmond removed her glasses and looked directly at me. Temporary full custody of Ivy Marie Harrington is hereby granted to Vincent Harrington pending 6-month review. Mr. Bryce Harrington will have supervised visitation only contingent upon completion of court-ordered therapy and parenting education classes. No overnight visits. Psychological evaluation must clear the supervised restriction before unsupervised contact is permitted. I exhaled 5 days of waiting, 30 years of failing, all compressed into this single verdict. The court recognizes, Judge Redmond continued, that generational patterns of discipline are not easily broken. Mr. Bryce Harrington's testimony revealed learned behavior transmitted from his own childhood. This does not excuse the harm caused, but it provides context for rehabilitation. The supervised visitation structure is designed to protect the child while allowing the father opportunity to demonstrate changed behavior. She paused, looked at Bryce. Mr. Harrington, do you understand these conditions? Bryce stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. His voice was hoarse. I'd also like to address the property matter if the court permits. Judge Redmond gestured for him to continue. Simone stiffened beside me. She hadn't expected this. Judge Redmond took the papers, scanned them briefly. You understand this. Returns the property to your father. You're surrendering the claim to the asset voluntarily. Yes, Your Honor, Bryce said quietly. It was never mine. I transferred the deed without my father's full knowledge or consent under false pretenses. I'm correcting that now. Judge Redmond made a note. The court acknowledges this voluntary surrender. Mr. Harrington's acknowledgement of past wrongs doesn't erase them, but it may change the future. I understand, Bryce said. He sat down slowly, shoulders tight. Judge Redmond signed the custody order with deliberate strokes, granting me immediate custody while setting the standard milestone tracking. The temporary order was effective immediately with the 6-month status review scheduled for March 2025. Immediately following the hearing, that same Saturday afternoon, armed with the court order, Hayes drove over to Bryce's house to retrieve the rest of Ivy's belongings. When he returned, he carried her cardboard box of books up the front steps, while Ivy stood on the porch watching him with quiet curiosity. She finally had her things ready to settle into my home without the fear of being dragged back. Ready? I asked. She nodded. Inside, I led her down the hallway to the bedroom with yellow walls. The bed was made with fresh sheets, soft blue comforter Hayes had picked out at Target. The closet was empty, waiting. The window faced the backyard where October leaves drifted across the grass. And this room is yours, Ivy, I said. Make it however you want. She stepped inside carefully, like testing ice. Her eyes traveled across the walls, the bed, the window. She set her bags down near the dresser. Can I put Gerald by the window? She asked. You can put him anywhere you like, I said. It's your room. She walked to the window and placed Gerald carefully on the sill, adjusting him, so he faced the backyard. Then she reached up and opened the window 2 inches. Fresh air flowed in cool, carrying the smell of cut grass and autumn. I noticed her hands on the window frame. No hesitation, no looking back for permission. Can I open the window a little? She asked, even though she'd already done it. As much as you want, I said. You're safe here. She smiled slightly. Gerald likes to see the backyard. Hayes appeared in the doorway with the box of books. Where do you want these, Ivy? By the bed, please, she said. He set the box down and stepped back. The 3 of us stood there for a moment, Ivy arranging Gerald just right on the windowsill, Hayes watching with his arms crossed me, standing in the doorway. Yellow walls like sunlight after years of locked doors and brown carpet courtrooms. Ivy opened the box and started pulling out books, picture books, chapter books. A worn copy of Charlotte's Web with the spine cracked from reading. She stacked them carefully on the bedside table, organizing them by height. Ivy, I said quietly. The door doesn't lock from the outside. You can come out anytime you want. Kitchen, living room, backyard, anywhere. This is your home. She looked at me, really looked for the first time since arriving. Even at night. Especially at night, I said. If you're hungry, get food. If you're scared, come find me. If you just want to sit in the living room, that's fine too. No locks, no rules about that. She nodded, slowly processing this information like a new language. Gerald sat on the windowsill, one button eye, watching the backyard. The window stayed open. Fresh air kept flowing in. Ivy breathed it in, shoulders relaxing slightly. I stood in the doorway, watching her arrange her small collection of belongings books, a purple hair ribbon, a drawing of a house with no locks on the doors. This is where the loop stops, I thought. 30 years too late for Bryce, just in time for Ivy. The loop stops here. I found the cookies on Tuesday, 3 sleeves of Oreos tucked beneath Ivy's socks in the dresser drawer, hidden like contraband. She was at school. I stood in her doorway holding the packages, Gerald watching from the windowsill with his single button eye. She needed to know it was safe before she'd stop hiding. I left the Oreos where I'd found them, carefully repositioned under the socks. Then I went to the kitchen and filled a wicker basket with crackers, dried fruit granola bars, and a sleeve of those same Oreos. I carried it upstairs and placed it on her dresser beside the lamp. On an index card in my surgical handwriting, I wrote, "Your late-night snack basket." When Ivy came home from school, I mentioned it casually. "There's a basket on your dresser, for whenever you're hungry." She nodded but didn't go look. Not yet. That night, I woke at 2 in the morning to soft sounds in the kitchen. I found Ivy standing in the dark, Gerald clutched tight against her chest, staring at the closed refrigerator. "Can't sleep?" I asked quietly. She startled. "I wanted water." "Would you like oatmeal too?" She hesitated. "Is it okay?" "Always," I said. I sat at the kitchen table without turning on the overhead lights, just the stove light casting soft shadows. I made oatmeal with brown sugar and cinnamon, the way my mother used to make it. Ivy sat across from me, Gerald in her lap, watching me stir. "You can come down any time," I said. "Day or night, the kitchen's always open." She ate slowly, one small spoonful at a time, like she was testing whether this was real. 3 nights later, 2 in the morning again. This time she asked a different question. "Grandpa, can biscuits be regular, or are they still special? Isin buying sinji basis, mandu." I looked at her standing in the kitchen doorway, bare feet on the cold tile, Gerald tucked under one arm. "Every day if you want," I said. "You choose what's special now." Week 2. Ivy entered the kitchen without Gerald. Such a small thing, such a massive victory. She walked to the table, empty-handed, sat down, and asked if we had apples. I sliced one for her without comment. The hoarded Oreos in her drawer remained untouched beneath the socks. The basket on her dresser needed refilling twice. Progress measured in tiny absences and quiet requests. Late November, Bryce arrived for his first supervised visit. I watched through the living room window as his car pulled into the driveway, a modest sedan, not the luxury vehicle he'd driven before. He sat behind the wheel for 2 full minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, preparing himself. I opened the front door before he could knock. She's in the living room," I said. Bryce stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight. He looked smaller somehow, thinner. The expensive watch was gone. "Is she—" He paused. "Does she want to see me?" "We'll find out together," I said. Ivy was sitting on the floor with a coloring book, crayons spread in a careful rainbow arc. She looked up when Bryce entered, her hand freezing mid-stroke. Bryce crossed the room slowly and sat on the floor. Instead of taking the chair, made himself physically smaller, less towering. He folded his legs and sat 3 feet away from her, giving her space. "Hi, Ivy," he said quietly. "Hi, Daddy." Silence stretched between them. I stayed in the kitchen doorway, close enough to intervene, far enough to let them try. "Ivy, I'm sorry," Bryce said finally. "I know that's not enough, but it's true. I'm sorry for the way I treated you, for the locks, for the rules, for making you scared." Ivy didn't look up from her coloring book. She picked up a purple crayon and colored carefully inside the lines. "Miss Stafford says sorry means trying to change," she said. Bryce's shoulders trembled slightly. "Your teacher is right. That's what I'm trying to do." Bryce sat on the floor, making himself small the way he once made Ivy small, but this time to heal instead of harm. The hour ended quietly. Ivy showed him 3 finished coloring pages. Bryce asked what she was reading in school. They talked about Charlotte's Web and whether spiders could really write words. Normal things, careful things. At the door, Bryce turned back. "Dad," he said, voice low, "I'm doing the therapy for me, not to get custody back." I waited. Even if I never get her back, I need to understand what I did. Dr. Brennan says I can't fix the future until I face the past. So that's what I'm doing. For me, not for the court. I saw my son clearly for the first time in 38 years. Not the ambitious executive chasing Bernard Whitfield's approval. Not the strict father enforcing grandfather's rules. Just Bryce broken and trying. That's the first step, I said quietly. He nodded and walked to his smaller car. The engine started with a modest sound. He drove away slowly, following the speed limit. December morning, cold sunlight streaming through the kitchen window. Ivy came downstairs in her purple pajamas, hair tangled from sleep. Grandpa, the basket is empty. First time she'd asked, instead of hiding. First time she'd trusted the supply would continue. Let's see what we have, I said. I opened the kitchen cabinet, the one at her eye level, the one I'd reorganized specifically so she could reach everything. Crackers, cookies, granola, bars, dried fruit. Abundance, unlocked, available. Ivy stood before it, staring at the shelves. Then she reached in. No hesitation, no looking back for permission, no fear. She took a package of cookies, the same Oreos she'd been hoarding in her drawer, and held them like they were normal, like food was normal, like safety was normal. I turned away so she wouldn't see my eyes well up. 30 years of failing Bryce. 30 years of perpetuating what my father taught me. 30 years of missing the signs until Ivy's bruises made them impossible to ignore. But this small hand reaching freely into an open cabinet, taking cookies without fear, this was the loop reversing. Can I have these for breakfast? Ivy asked behind me. I wiped my eyes, quickly turned back. You can have whatever you want. She smiled slightly and sat at the table Gerald tucked beside her plate. She opened the package and ate cookies for breakfast like it was the most natural thing in the world. Through the window, December morning, light caught the frost on the grass. The backyard stretched out peaceful and ordinary. Inside, a 6-year-old girl ate cookies without asking, without hiding, without fear. 3 generations finally moving toward healing instead of harm. The loop didn't just stop, it reversed. Flour dusted the counter like December snow, and Ivy's hands, small, careful, pressed Helen's old biscuit cutter into the dough. The kitchen smelled like butter and warmth, the oven preheating with a low hum that filled the quiet morning. Press straight down, I said, guiding her wrist gently. Don't twist or they won't rise properly. Ivy nodded, concentrating. She pressed the metal circle down through the dough, lifted it, and a perfect round sat on the counter. Like this, she asked. Perfect, I said, just like that. She cut another, then another, arranging them carefully on the baking sheet I'd lined with parchment paper. Flour covered her fingers, dusted her purple sweater, settled in the creases of the cutting board Helen had used for 30 years. Whose cutter was this? Ivy asked, turning the metal circle in her hands. My wife Helen's, I said. Your grandmother's. She made biscuits every Sunday morning. Used that same cutter for as long as I knew her. Ivy ran her thumb along the worn edge. Where is she now? She passed away, I said quietly. Before you were born, but she would have loved teaching you this. Ivy nodded slowly and set the cutter down. She cut 3 more biscuits in careful silence, the metal pressing through dough with soft resistance. Then she stopped, looked up at me, flour still on her fingers. Grandpa, why did you save me? The question hung in the warm kitchen air. Direct, small voice but clear eyes. My hands stilled on the dough I'd been rolling. Because you're my granddaughter. But you didn't know me before, she said. Not really, we only visited twice. I looked at her standing beside me, 6 years old, holding a question she'd been carrying for weeks. Children always knew when adults were working up to truth. You're right, I said. I didn't know you well, but I know when a child needs protection. I'm a pediatrician, I was a pediatrician. I spent 31 years learning to see when something's wrong. Ivy's eyes didn't leave mine. What else? Smart girl. She knew there was more. Because I should have known sooner, I said quietly. I should have seen the signs earlier. I should have asked better questions when you visited. I should have looked closer. Known what? She asked. My hands still on the dough surgeon's hands that stayed steady for 31 years, but trembled when it mattered most. I measured my words carefully, age-appropriate honesty, without details she didn't need. Known that you needed help, I said. That the rules at your dad's house weren't normal rules. That you were scared and hungry and locked in. I should have seen it sooner. Ivy processed this, her small hands picking up the biscuit cutter again, turning it over. But you saw it eventually. Yes, I said, eventually. She cut another biscuit, placed it carefully on the sheet, then looked up again. Why didn't you see it before? The questions children asked, the ones adults spent decades avoiding. I looked at the cut biscuits lined on the sheet, 12 perfect circles waiting for the oven. Because I was silent once already, I said quietly. When someone else needed protection, and I didn't speak up then, so I missed the pattern when it repeated. Ivy's eyes widened slightly. When were you silent? Long time ago, I said. When I was much younger, someone I loved needed help, and I almost said something, but I didn't. I walked away instead. Who? She asked. I met her eyes. Your dad, when he was about your age. Ivy's hands stilled on the cutter. She didn't ask for details, just absorbed this information like she absorbed everything carefully, completely. I won't be silent again, I said. That's the other reason I saved you, because I already failed once. I won't fail twice. She nodded slowly. Flour dusted the counter between us. The oven beeped, preheated, ready. Ivy looked up at me again. Flour still on her fingers, biscuit cutter in her small hand. Did you change? She asked. The question she needed to know. The question every child asks when they need to believe people can be different. Some questions deserved answers measured in daily effort, not finished redemption. I'm trying, I said, meeting her eyes. Every day. That's the best I can promise. But did you change? She pressed. Or are you still the same? I knelt down so we were eye-level flour on my hands, dough under my fingernails. I'm trying to change, I said carefully. Every single day. Some days I do better than others, but I wake up every morning and try again. That's what changes, not one big moment, but lots of small choices. Ivy looked at me for a long moment. Then, Ms. Stafford says trying is what matters. Your teacher is right, I said. My dad said he's trying too, Ivy said quietly. At the visit, he said he's trying to understand what he did. He is, I said. It doesn't fix what happened, but it's a start. Ivy nodded, satisfied with this answer, in a way only children who understood the process could be. She straightened, brushed flour off her hands onto her sweater, and reached for the biscuit cutter again. Can I cut the rest? She asked. Go ahead, I said. She pressed the cutter into the remaining dough straight down, no twisting, and lifted out another perfect circle. Then another. Life continuing. Biscuits needing cutting. Breakfast needing making. I stood and moved the finished tray to the oven, slid it onto the center rack. 12 biscuits that would rise in the heat, golden and warm, ready in 15 minutes. Ivy cut the last 3 biscuits and stepped back to survey her work. How many did we make? She asked. 15, I said. That's a lot of biscuits. Can Hayes have some when he comes over? Absolutely. We'll save him the best ones. She smiled and reached for more flour, dusting her hands before starting to clean the counter. The conversation settled between us, not solving everything, but honest. And honesty was where healing began. Outside the window, December morning, light caught the frost melting off the grass. Inside, the oven warmed the kitchen. Ivy hummed quietly as she worked, wiping flour from the counter with a damp cloth. Trying every day. It was enough. The snow started mid-afternoon, and Ivy discovered it the way she discovered most things, quietly, then, all at once. She'd been at the kitchen table with her homework when she went still and said, Grandpa, look. Outside the window, flakes came down slowly and deliberately, settling on the fence posts, filling the grooves in the patio stones, covering the flower bed we'd dug through together in October. The first snow of December, I said. She pressed her palm flat against the glass, pulled it back, and looked at the fog her warmth left behind, watching it shrink and disappear. Can Gerald see it from the sill? Turn him toward the window. She walked to the windowsill, repositioned the rabbit 2 inches to the left, then stood back and checked his angle like a photographer framing a shot. Better, she decided, and returned to her homework. That was it. No performance, no permission-seeking. Just a child adjusting a stuffed rabbit so he'd have a good view of the snow, then getting back to long division. I stood at the stove and let that land somewhere quiet inside me. I made cocoa the way I always made it, milk low, and slow cocoa powder, brown sugar. The pinch of salt Helen taught me kept it from tasting flat. When the mugs were ready, I set hers on the table without announcement. She reached for it without looking up from her worksheet, both hands wrapping around the ceramic, and kept working. The homework took another 10 minutes. She checked her answers twice, her habit not a rule I'd set, then closed the notebook and picked up her mug with both hands. It done, she said. Good work. She looked out at the snow which had thickened in the last hour. The backyard was almost white. The bird feeder haze had hung in October, wore a small cap of snow on its roof. "Do birds come in winter?" she asked. "Some stay, mostly sparrows, cardinals sometimes. Gerald would like a cardinal. We can put out more seed tomorrow." She considered this seriously, nodded once, and drank her cocoa. We stayed at the table until the light outside went gray and the street lamps came on one by one down the block. No particular reason to stay, no particular reason to move, just the kitchen warm, the snow steady, the cocoa cooling to the right temperature for small hands. At some point, she leaned sideways in her chair and rested her head against my arm, not asking, not explaining, just leaning the way a child leans against someone they trust. I didn't move. Outside, the snow kept falling. Gerald watched from the windowsill. The bird feeder stood patient in the yard, waiting for spring. Inside, a 6-year-old finished her cocoa, set down the mug, and fell asleep against my arm, without asking if that was allowed. It was. It always would be. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones we overlook. For 31 years, I examined other people's children. I documented bruises, I filed reports, I saved lives. But when family betrayal happened under my own roof, I couldn't see it. Don't make my mistake. Don't let professional expertise or family loyalty or the comfortable lie of everything's fine blind you to what's right in front of you. The cost is too high. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other wound because it comes from the people we're supposed to trust, without question. When I discovered what my son was doing to my granddaughter, it didn't just break my heart, it shattered everything I thought I knew about my own family. But here's what I learned. Silence perpetuates cycles. Speaking up breaks them. I believe God gave me a second chance to do what I should have done 30 years ago, to choose protection over comfort, truth over loyalty. The generational loop stopped because I finally found the courage to see what I'd been avoiding. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced family betrayal that forced you to choose between loyalty and protection? Your story might help someone else find their courage. Please share this with anyone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Revenge Dad for more stories like this one. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story contains fictionalized elements, but the message that breaking cycles of harm requires courage, honesty, and the willingness to see uncomfortable truths is what I hope stays with you.